Chapter 208. Zheng Han's reaction was extremely fast. Once he sensed that the situation was not right, he immediately flew away, not caring about the life and death of his fellow sect members. No pop-up window chi in his mind, as long as he could preserve his life, he had the right to think about other things. On the road of cultivation, either you die or I live. That Zhang Yan's sword was as fast as lightning. If he was slightly slower, he would have died under the sword. If his fellow sect members stayed behind, they might have been able to delay him for a while. When he returned to the sea boat, with the protection of the array, he naturally wouldn't have to worry about Zhang Yan finding trouble with him. Because he left so decisively, when Zhang Yan killed Shen Minggu and came back to find him, he was only a few hundred feet away from the mysterious Snake Nine Orifices great sea boat. Seeing that he would be able to reach the sea boat in a moment, Zheng Han couldn't help but reveal a look of joy. He thought hatefully, this Zhang Yan is so cruel. So many fellow sect members died in his hands. Now that I'm not his opponent, when I return to the sect and finish condensing my core, I'll come back for the face I lost today. However, at this moment, he suddenly saw a golden ray of light coming from the heavens, blocking in front of him. Zhang Yan stepped on a cloud of smoke. Though there was a faint smile on his face, his pair of deep eyes were like bottomless pits, cold as ice. Zheng Han felt a chill run up his spine, as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. However, he also knew that at this moment, he couldn't just focus on escaping, or else he would die even faster. With a loud roar, he raised the 28 yin light flying needles into the air. Using all the spiritual energy in his body, he sent them flying like locusts towards Zhang Yan. Zhang Yan snorted. Without seeing how he moved, a cloud of smoke rose in front of him. This was the killing intent extracted from the golden core, containing the power of the core's killing intent. When the flying needles were blocked by it, most of them were swept to the side. Occasionally, one or two strands of baleful qi would penetrate through, but they were like arrows at the end of their flight, and when they struck Zhang Yan's forehead, only clanging sounds could be heard as golden flames shot out, but he seemed as if he didn't notice it at all, and not even a trace of it was left behind. Zheng Han was shocked, and his eyes were filled with panic. Zhang Yan casually took a step forward, raised his hand, and waved. A gust of golden smoke rolled toward Zheng Han. Zheng Han felt his scalp go numb. He quickly retreated and hurriedly threw the Ganoderma in his hand into the air. This Ganoderma was naturally born and grew from the earth. It was only a branch and leaf of a spiritual vein on Taihao Mountain. It did not need to be refined to possess its own spirituality. At this moment, it flew up and opened its spiritual cover to block the smoke that was like a ball of fire outside. But Zheng Han also knew that this was only a temporary measure. Even if he could block it once or twice, could he block it 3 or 4 times? Seeing that he no longer had a chance to board the ship, he couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. However, he had cultivated for 100 years, so he wasn't as flustered as Shen Minggu. With just a thought, an idea flashed through his mind, and he had a plan to escape. Putting aside the fact that Zhang Yan's cultivation had suddenly increased for some unknown reason, even with his original speed, he knew that he could not outrun Zhang Yan on the surface of the sea. At this moment, there was only one place to go. He took out a black jade talisman from his sleeve. There was a picture of rippling waves on it. This was the sea mausoleum goldfish talisman that Qiu Daoren had given him. It could be used to summon the spirits of fish and turtles to cross the sea. He threw this talisman into the sea. In a flash, there was a spiritual light that penetrated through the waves. A 10-feet-long koi leaped out of the sea and swallowed him. Then, it shook its head and swayed its tail, diving into the water. When Zhang Yan saw this, a mocking expression appeared on his face. He laughed and said, "Wandering soul in the bottom of the cauldron, you still dare to fight like a cornered beast?" He shouted and raised his hand to form a spell. The 3 elements mixed water banner flew out. He held it in his hand and waved it. In an instant, the sound of waves became more rapid and white foam surged. A whirlpool of unknown depth suddenly appeared on the surface of the sea. The koi was originally swimming in the sea, but it was suddenly pulled by a violent whirlpool. This fish was formed from the spirit, so how could it resist? It only struggled for a moment before disappearing without a trace. With this fish gone, Zheng Han could no longer hide himself. He was once again exposed to the sunlight. Seeing that Zhang Yan could still find him after he escaped into the sea, Zheng Han lost all hope and let out a roar. Mysterious light surged out from all the acupoints in his body, ready to fight for his life. But how could Zhang Yan give him the chance? He raised his hand and a golden mist flew out, hitting Zheng Han's head. With a loud bang, Zheng Han's brain exploded and he died on the spot. Zhang Yan pointed with his hand and the golden smoke curled up again, dispersing the spirit and wrapping it in his sleeve. He looked around and saw that Lu Mainyang, her brother, and Monster King Junyu were still entangled with Su Gongyuan and his wife. Lu Mainyang and her brother worked together and cooperated well with each other. They were able to hold their own against Su Gongyuan, while Sovereign King Yu Demon King had the upper hand. However, the woman in the rainbow-colored feather robe was very tenacious. She relied on the ribbon and did not lose. Zhang Yan narrowed his eyes and smiled. His body turned into a wisp of smoke and appeared behind the woman in no time. The woman only saw a wisp of smoke and did not know that it was Zhang Yan. However, he seemed to have bad intentions towards her and she could not help but panic. She was already at a disadvantage and this panic exposed her weakness. Monster King Junyu would not miss this opportunity. The silver spear in her hand was like a poisonous snake coming out of its hole, stabbing into the woman's shoulder. The woman screamed and did not continue fighting. She rolled up the ribbon and immediately turned into a wisp of smoke and escaped. Su Gongyuan was naturally aware of the situation on this side. He unconsciously frowned and his eyes flashed a few times. Now that he was the only one left here, although he still had a trump card that he had not used, no matter how arrogant he was, he did not have the confidence to fight against 3 core formation cultivators alone. Suddenly, he felt that things were not going well. With a "hey" sound, he waved his hand and a yellow smoke flew out from his sleeve. Inside the smoke, an eerie ghost face appeared. It opened its huge mouth and roared repeatedly, as if it wanted to swallow its prey. 9 Netherson Luo Qi. Lu Mainyang and her brother were shocked and quickly retreated to the side. Su Gongyuan snorted and calmly rose to the top of the cloud. Junior, I will leave the head on your neck for a few days. I will come back for it next time. As the voice rumbled on the sea, the cloud of fog had already gone far away. Zhang Yan smiled nonchalantly. He did not take the threat to heart at all. He pressed down the cloud and slowly descended. He stood on the immortal mansion again and looked around. At this time, although Guo Lai's battle was fierce, because of the Ju Men's formation, he was able to protect himself. On the other hand, Zhao Zhengsheng, Wang Yingfang and the others were locked in battle with a few powerful disciples of Wudang's spiritual hall. It was hard to tell who would win in a short period of time. The 6 monster kings were surging with murderous aura and the sound of weapons colliding could be heard. They were also fighting fiercely. Zhang Yan was not in the mood to deal with other people. As long as he guarded the talisman in his hand well, he would have completed Tao Xinjin's task. Therefore, he said goodbye to the Lu sisters and Monster King Jun Miao and sat in the immortal mansion to breathe. Zhang Yan silently checked the golden core in his stomach. It was only an hour of fighting, but the golden core had shrunk by a quarter, and the remaining half had dimmed a lot. He thought to himself that the golden core could only be used 2 or 3 more times before it would completely dissipate. It was probably not as good as the last time, but it could still turn the situation around at the critical moment. Zhang Yan sat there for an entire night, yet no one came to provoke him again. After all, he had killed over 100 people in succession and even injured 9 leaders Demon King with a single strike of his sword. In the eyes of everyone, he was already terrifying and ferocious. Moreover, other than him, there were 3 other core formation cultivators here. At this time, there were very few people who had the ability to fight with them. Those rogue cultivators did not dare to come and provoke them, so they were able to sit peacefully for the night. When the sun rose, Zhang Yan heard a gentle voice whispering in his ear, "Fellow Taoist Zhang, thanks to your help, I've succeeded today. If there's any movement later, please don't panic." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly felt the mountains and rivers tremble, as if the sky and earth had turned upside down. In the air, old Taoist Xiu spat out a mouthful of blood and fell from the sky like a meteor. His nascent soul was covered in spiderweb-like cracks and shards of gold fell from it. The other 3 true realm cultivators were also in a sorry state. Before the thousands of cultivators on the sea could react, they heard a long chime, and a Dharma image broke out of the immortal mansion under Zhang Yan's feet. The Dharma image had a black and white fish hugging each other, and outside, there was a black tortoise, a flood dragon, and countless heavenly cranes. The roars of the mountains and the roars of the seas were like a tidal wave. At this time, a red sun leaped out of the sea, and the sky was filled with golden light. It was as if the sky and earth were giving birth to the Tao of nurturing all living beings. A voice in the clouds sang, "The Dharma image competes with the sun, and the universe is in control. Today, I will escape from the tribulation and fly to the heavenly hut." As soon as the song came out, Tao Xinjin had refined the immortal mansion and broken through the barrier. He had escaped from the tribulation and stepped into the realm of heavenly abode true cultivator. When the pure feather disciples saw that their ancestral master had succeeded, their faces were filled with excitement. The rogue cultivators were scared out of their wits and did not know what to do. The mighty Dharma idol swayed, and an overwhelming amount of spirit light came crashing down, transforming into countless heavenly beasts and spirit birds that flew toward the cultivators. The 3 nascent soul cultivators and their disciples felt a great force pulling them into the Dharma idol, causing them to involuntarily fall into the Dharma idol. After the disciples were taken in, the Dharma image disappeared, and an elegant Taoist appeared. He held a horsetail whisk in his hand and sat on the clouds. He smiled and said, "Today, the Pure Feather sect is established, and we intend to drive the immortal mansion to the west of the far sea, by the side of the 3 mountains. We will find a spiritual cave to be our sect. Those who are willing to follow me can come." The 6 demon kings, including Demon King Xian Tong, were watching with their hearts in turmoil. They could not control themselves and did not need to think too much. They could not wait and shouted, "We are willing to follow true cultivator." They did not expect the situation to turn out this way, and they were secretly glad that they made the right choice. The far sea was a place that only true cultivators could set foot in. For example, Mijin of Chongyue True Temple had long gone to the far sea to cultivate and did not care about worldly affairs. To be able to follow Tao Xinjin was undoubtedly a great opportunity, so why would they give it up? Lu Mainyang and her brother, as well as Demon King Junyu, were also envious. Although it was good for Tao Xinjin to enter the far sea, they knew that it was better to provide timely help than to add flowers to embroidery. In comparison, Zhang Yan's clear serenity heavenly lake was not far off. Moreover, he and Tao Xinjin were in the same sect and seemed to have a good relationship, so why would they give up what was close at hand for what was far away? Chapter 209. 10 years of hard training. Back to Donghua. Spring passed and autumn came. 10 years had passed in one sleep. In the dark quiet room, Zhang Yan slowly opened his eyes. In an instant, a cold light flashed in his eyes, and a threatening light flashed in his eyes. Then, the light disappeared. He slowly exhaled a breath of fresh air, stood up, and stepped out of the door. Outside the Immortal's cave was a valley surrounded by green on all sides. Under the shade of the trees, a broken stone staircase meandered up, twisting and turning into a spring stream. The valley was full of green pines and cypresses. Fragrant flowers danced and butterflies danced. The clear stream gurgled. Occasionally, a few young deer could be seen jumping over the rocks. This quiet place was actually in a spirit cave 3,000 feet below the sea. Entering and leaving this place required the protection of a talisman weapon. Although the spiritual chi here was not as good as the 10 spirit caves of Donghua continent, with the help of the divine abode, it was enough for a sect to establish itself. In the battle for the divine abode 10 years ago, the Nanhua sect, Taihao School, and many elders and disciples of the Wudang Spirit Temple were all captured by Tao Xinren. None of them managed to escape. However, there were many wandering cultivators watching. It did not take long for the news to spread throughout the East Sea, and the repercussions were endless. Especially Chongyue True Temple. When they heard that their direct disciple, Shinminggu, had been killed by Zhang Yan, they had once sent out powerful cultivators to search the outer seas. However, because Tao Xinren had used the power of the Purple Jade Divine Abode to move the Clear Feather sect to the distant seas, Zhang Yan had gone with him, so they returned without success. After hearing this, Chongyue True Temple did not give up for many years. They often sent cultivators to patrol the sea to search for traces of Zhang Yan. Those who were observant would be able to see that it was absolutely impossible for him to do such a thing for a mere heir disciple. However, even though there were many guesses, no one was able to see the true reason, and only Zhang Yan was clearly aware of it. After the Clear Feather sect was established here, Zhang Yan sent over a dozen elixir recipes as a sect opening gift. 1 or 2 of them were extremely rare. Now that the Clear Feather sect was about to be established, there were many areas where it was lacking. These pill formulas were enough to help the sect extend its lifespan for 1,000 years, so this gift was extremely valuable. After Perfected Tao saw it, he immediately invited Zhang Yan to the monastery to lecture for several months. Xinren Tao was from the Xianmen sect and had inherited the ancient immortals. Zhang Yan could take this opportunity to ask him for advice. Whenever he had any questions, Spiritual Master Tao would gladly answer and patiently guide him without hiding anything. He even reminded him that if he wanted to go to the next level during the core formation stage, there was no need to rush to break through to the next realm. Instead, he had to build a solid foundation. Every time he had a question, Tao Xinren would answer him happily and patiently. He didn't hide anything and even reminded him that if he wanted to reach a higher level when he condensed his core, he didn't have to rush to break through to the next realm. Instead, he had to stabilize his foundation. It could be said that he used 10 years to sort out everything he had learned from beginning to end. He understood many questions that he hadn't been able to solve before. With the guidance of an expert, he had a feeling that everything was clear in front of him. His gains could be said to be huge. However, it was time to leave now. Zhang Yan leisurely looked at the scenery on the mountain path. He walked forward slowly and unknowingly, he reached the end of the stone steps. He raised his head and saw a huge blue stone lying in front of him. Just as he was about to fly past it, a thought flashed through his mind and he let out a shout. A large yellow hand flew out from the top of the door and swelled to 100 feet in size. It grabbed downwards and with a muffled sound, the boulder was crushed to pieces. Zhang Yan smiled faintly. He shook his shoulder and retracted his hand. Tao Xinren had promised that if Zhang Yan was willing to help him, he would not only ask Zhang Yan to be the Clear Feather sect's guest elder but also to do 3 things for him. He could also learn one of the Clear Feather sect's techniques. At that time, he had chosen the mysterious yellow dragon capturing hand. When the disciples of Clear Feather sect practiced this incantation, they all used the interpretation that enlightened Master Tao had deciphered. However, Zhang Yan had directly asked for the eroded text original book to read. When he turned around and looked at the Tao book that enlightened Master Tao had deciphered, he unconsciously had a new understanding. These past few years, he had been practicing non-stop and could be considered to have made some small achievements. The reason why he chose this technique was not only because it could move mountains and move seas when practiced to a high level, but also because it required the earth essence chi of the 5 elements, which was one of the 5 elements he needed to collect. Tao Xinren had a treasure called the Yuankuan earth essence. This treasure could produce earth essence chi, which was used to open up islands and open up lands. The mysterious spirit island relied on this treasure to gather and form. This treasure was controlled by the 4 disciples of Tao Xinren, who took turns to control it. Zhang Yan used the excuse of practicing the mysterious yellow dragon capturing hand to obtain a lot of earth essence chi from Guolai. One had to know that earth was the mother of the 5 elements, and water was the source of the 5 elements. With these 2 elements, one could begin to practice the 5 elements' mysterious true light. However, when he really started to practice this technique, he felt that it was extremely difficult. Not to mention the complexity of the mysterious true light, even the inscriptions used were extremely difficult to decipher. Every step required him to use the broken jade to deduce it repeatedly. More often than not, when he thought that he had completely understood it, he would feel that he had gone down the wrong path while practicing in the jade, and he would need to start all over again. Over and over again, he spent 3 years deciphering the inscriptions, and then used 7 years to practice the water element true light. Even now, he only had a basic understanding of the technique, which showed how difficult it was to practice this technique. He was also very emotional. Fortunately, he was practicing the orthodox Xianmen. If he was a rogue cultivator, without a Xianmen technique as a foundation, he would not be able to practice this technique, even with the help of a powerful cultivator. At this moment, a cloud of smoke flew over from the east. After seeing him, it landed, and a loud laugh came, saying, "Brother Zhang, my master said that you will return to Donghua continent today, and it seems that is the case. I, Old Gua, have come to see you off." Zhang Yan looked up and saw Guolai walking over with a handsome Taoist child. Their movements were full of vigor, and they were in high spirits. He smiled and said, "Long time no see, Taoist brother Gua, your cultivation has improved again." Guolai grinned and said, "Ha, it is all thanks to junior brother Zhang's Dan water that I have today's good fortune." 10 years ago, Zhang Yan used the 7 leaves true truth grass to make a bottle of Dan water, and Guolai was able to completely refine the small golden elixir. These few years, he had been recuperating and finally succeeded in condensing the elixir again 2 years ago. According to common sense, Guolai's elixir should at most be of the lower 3 grades. Luckily, he had the help of Tao Jinren's internal energy, and his own foundation was strong. In the end, he accidentally became a 6th grade elixir, which was a blessing from the heavens, and there was still hope for him to achieve Taoism in the future. The path of cultivation is slow, why do you have to talk about it every day? Let's not talk about it, let's not talk about it. Guolai pulled the little Taoist child beside him over and said proudly, "Come, junior brother Zhang, Old Gua, have also accepted a disciple. What do you think?" Zhang Yan had already noticed this Taoist boy who looked like a tiger. Now that he looked at him a few more times, he nodded and said, "Unpolished gold and unpolished jade. If he were to be sculpted properly, Clear Feather sect would definitely gain another handsome talent." Guolai heard this praise and laughed out loud. He glared at his Taoist child and said, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and kowtow and call me Uncle Master." Oh. The Taoist child seemed to be quite afraid of Guolai. He knelt down and kowtowed a few times to Zhang Yan. Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Today I had a divination, but it said that I'm going to lose money. I didn't understand what it meant at first, but now I know it's because of Taoist brother Gua's disciple." Guolai chuckled and said, "Old brother Zhang, who doesn't know that you have a lot of good stuff in this cave of yours? Teaching a disciple costs a lot, and I, Old Gua, have been living alone for hundreds of years. I don't have much money, so I can only be thick-skinned and come here to beg you." Because they knew that Zhang Yan was an expert in alchemy, even the demon kings who were elders in the sect were polite to him, not daring to slight him. Every few days, they would send him a lot of rare treasures from overseas, so everyone knew that he had a lot of good stuff. Zhang Yan thought for a moment, took out a bottle of pills from his sleeve, and stuffed it into the Taoist child's hand. Guolai's expression turned serious, and he cupped his hands at Zhang Yan. Although he didn't know what it was, he knew that any pill Zhang Yan gave him was not ordinary. Even though he came here to freeload, if Zhang Yan's disciple came to him in the future, he naturally wouldn't be able to refuse. He couldn't help but sigh and say, "Old brother Zhang, I also have a lot of things for condensing pills on Clear Feather Island. If it wasn't for Master saying not to hinder your opportunity, I really would have given you some." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Taoist brother Gua, there's no need to be so polite. When Demon King Lu and his brother, and Demon King Jing come out of seclusion, please pass on a message for me." In the future, when I return to the mountain after condensing pills, I'll naturally invite the three of them to my heavenly lake of clear nether. Guo Lai patted his chest and said, "Don't worry, Taoist brother. We will definitely pass on the message." Lu Mainyang and Jun Yueyao were demon kings. Although they had followed Zhang Yan to the far sea, they were unwilling to accept the position of elders in Clear Feather sect. Tao Xinren naturally understood their intentions, so he specially summoned the three of them to give them some pointers. The three of them also knew that this opportunity was because of Zhang Yan, and they were even more determined in their previous thoughts. However, at the moment, their techniques had not been completed, and they were still cultivating in seclusion. Guo Lai took out a talisman from his sleeve and handed it to Zhang Yan. He said, "This is a talisman given to you by Master. It can help you get out of the far sea and back to the Donghua continent. You won't have to worry about anyone finding trouble with you." Zhang Yan reached out and took it. He thought for a moment, then said, "After I leave, I'll have to trouble Taoist brother Gua to take care of Gu Chu, for me." After Gu Chu, successfully opened her meridians in Swan Goose Temple, another technique appeared on the jade scroll. That day, Pu Yuzi had said that after opening her meridians, he would no longer need to look after this disciple. So, Zhang Yan simply left her in Clear Feather sect. As for what happened after that, it had nothing to do with him. Guo Lai chuckled and said, "These few days, I've already brought that little girl over to live with my disciple. The two of them are about the same age, so they can be companions. Brother, you don't have to worry." Zhang Yan smiled and gave Guo Lai a meaningful look. He had only told Guo Lai that this Gu Chu, was Pu Yuzi's direct disciple. Heaven Mending Pavilion's path of artifact forging was unparalleled in the world, so how could he not know what Guo Lai was planning? This Gu Chu, was already in her early 20s, while Guo Lai's disciple was only 7 or 8 years old. To say that they were about the same age was pure nonsense. He was probably eyeing Pu Yuzi's wealth. However, he did not expose him. Instead, he smiled and nodded. "Since that's the case, Taoist brother Gua, I will take my leave." Guo Lai solemnly cupped his hands and bowed. "Brother Zhang, take care." Zhang Yan let out a long and clear laugh, and rose into the air. He actually left as soon as he said he would. For a cultivator like him, his lifespan was long, and his heart was unfettered. Naturally, he could come and go without any worries. As soon as he left the immortal manor, he slapped away the talisman that Tao Xinren had given him and protected himself. A ray of golden light rode the waves and returned to the East Flower continent. #target =_. Chapter 210. Seeking revenge on the river with the help of a talisman personally given by Tao Xinren, Zhang Yan escaped from the bottom of the sea. There was only a ray of golden light on this trip. Even if there were cultivators in the sea who accidentally saw him, they would only think that he was some powerful cultivator passing by and would retreat far away. In just a few days, he had returned to the Donghua continent. However, he was completely protected by the talisman, so he had no idea where he would be going in the Donghua continent. At this moment, he stood in the air and looked around. The mountains and rivers within 1,000 miles were all in his eyes. After looking for a while, he could already tell that he was in the Donghua continent, but he didn't know where exactly he was. He rode on a ray of light and followed the river inland. In less than an hour, he saw a big city in the distance. Then, he pressed down the cloud and landed in a forest. He walked along the mountain path, and not long after, he met a traveling merchant on a donkey. He walked up to him and asked for directions. The merchant saw that he was dressed like a Taoist and was very friendly. He pointed at the foot of the mountain and said, "Look at where this Taoist is coming from. Are you from Taizhou? Look, after passing that boundary stone, go east along the river for another 50 miles, and you will reach the city of Linzhou under the rule of Kangqing Commandery." Zhang Yan was born into a family of officials in the Wei dynasty, and he had read geography before. When he heard this, he knew that he was in the territory of the great Liang dynasty. Linzhou of Kangqing Commandery. He thought about it and couldn't help but smile. The reason why he came here was probably not without reason. If he was not wrong, it should be the deliberate arrangement of that Tao Jinren. Tao Jinren once told him that there was a Taoist temple outside of Kangxin Commandery of the Liang dynasty called Baofeng Temple. When the temple master was young, he ate a spiritual herb by mistake and almost lost his life. Fortunately, Tao Jinren passed by and saved him. He even took him in as a registered disciple. Counting the days, it had been more than 100 years since then. Now that the Clear Feather sect was established overseas, and Zhang Yan was also a guest elder in the sect, Tao Jinren probably wanted to use him to test this person to see if he could be accepted into the inner sect and strengthen the Clear Feather sect. Zhang Yan understood this and smiled faintly. After bidding farewell to the woodcutter, he was about to get up and fly away when he suddenly had a sudden impulse, as if there was something he was worried about here. He was slightly surprised and hurriedly made a divination with his fingers. He couldn't help but smile, so there's a karma that hasn't been settled, and it's going to be settled here today. He shook his hand, and a small python rolled out of his sleeve. Zhang Pan, a Taoist boy. The small python rolled on the ground and transformed into an ugly Taoist child. It stood up and said in a muffled voice, "Master, do you like my transformation?" Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Although he is a little ugly, he still looks like a child." Zhang Pan hung his head dejectedly. "This lowly one's aptitude is lacking and cannot be trained. Please punish me, master." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "If your aptitude isn't good, then you need to cultivate diligently. It's already very rare for you to be able to refine your body to the size you want in 10 years. There's no need to belittle yourself. Come with me." The two of them walked out of the forest and headed towards a river crossing. At this time, it was already dusk. The mountains and waters on the river reflected the rosy glow of the rosy clouds. The fishing boats sang in the evening, and a small boat wandered amidst the light of the water. Zhang Yan brought Zhang Pan to the riverbank and stood still. Gazing at the faraway mountains in the twilight, he could faintly see a ball of spiritual energy permeating through the air. He thought to himself, that must be where Baofeng Temple is located. At this time, there was a boat not far from the riverbank, and someone was secretly sizing him up. This person was a young married woman in her 30s wearing a light yellow robe. Her eyebrows were lightly swept, and her eyes were bright and kind. She held her stomach lightly and lifted a gap in the curtain. She said to a man at the front of the boat, "Husband, look at this Taoist priest. His bearing and bearing are all extraordinary. I'm afraid he came from some big Taoist academy. Since there's no ferry now, why don't we invite him up to ride with us?" The man was wearing a robe and looked like a scholar. When he heard this, he frowned and said, "Wife, haven't you caused enough trouble for us because of that Taoist ma? Why did you still provoke a Taoist?" When the young married woman heard this, she seemed to be touched. She sighed faintly and said, "Husband is right. It's this servant who has implicated husband." The young scholar saw that the young married woman's eyes were slightly red and she was about to cry. He was immediately at a loss and said in a panic, "Don't cry, don't cry. I'll do as my wife says, I'll do as my wife says." He ordered the boatman to pull the boat to the riverbank. The boatman immediately agreed readily, "All right. Master, please sit down. I'll pull to the riverbank now." The Wu royal family of the Liang dynasty was similar to the Wei dynasty. The entire country worshipped Taoism. All Taoist priests in the world did not have to pay taxes or pay taxes. They could travel the world with just an imperial edict and did not have to pay respect to officials. Therefore, if there were Taoists on a regular ferry, the patrolling tyrants would not dare to come up and extort money. Even the most vicious bandits and mountain thieves were afraid of attracting trouble and would not have any ideas on Taoists. Therefore, this boatman was also very willing. When the boat pulled to the riverbank, the young scholar bowed to Zhang Yan and said loudly, "Is this Taoist priest looking for a ferry? Why don't you come with me?" Zhang Yan had just performed another divination on the river. He was sure that the cause and effect was on this couple. Thereupon he did not decline, he smiled and nodded his head. Waving his sleeve, he did not seem to make any movement, but he was already standing firmly on the boat. Zhang Pan did not lag behind him even half a step, he stood steadily behind him. The young scholar originally saw that Zhang Yan and the Taoist boy were still over 100 feet away. Suddenly, his vision blurred and the two of them were already in front of him. He was surprised and thought, my wife is right. This Taoist seems to have some cultivation. In this world, all the Taoists who came from the Taoist academies would more or less know some spells of chanting talismans to exorcise evil. He had heard his wife talk about it before, so he did not find it too strange. He bowed and said, I am Qin Jisher. How should I address Taoist priest? Zhang Yan bowed and said, my surname is Zhang. Qin Jisher said dryly, so it is Taoist priest Zhang. He was not good with words and had never liked Taoists. Therefore, after saying a few words, he did not continue. His wife saw this and shook her head. She ordered a maid to open the boat's curtain and stood out. She bowed to Zhang Yan and said, your servant greets Taoist priest Zhang. I wonder if Taoist priest is going to visit Taoist or travel. She did not come from an ordinary family and did not care about common courtesy. Chen Jisher saw her come out and had a helpless expression on his face. He said to Zhang Yan, this is my wife. Zhang Yan looked at Mrs. Chen and saw that she was full of energy, her eyes were full of spirit, and her voice was clear and bright. He knew that she must have trained in qi, and her belly was moist, as if she was pregnant. He immediately knew what was going on. He said, there is a Taoist temple on this mountain called Baofeng Temple. There is a Taoist there who has some relationship with me. I am going to visit him. Mrs. Chen's eyes lit up and said, what a coincidence. My uncle used to cultivate in Baofeng Temple. I wonder which Taoist priest Zhang knows. Who knows, maybe I know him too. Zhang Yan looked at her and said, his name is Lu Tianying. I wonder if Mrs. Chen has heard of him. Mrs. Chen frowned and suddenly exclaimed, Taoist priest is talking about Master Lu, old celestial Master Lu? Zhang Yan nodded and smiled, if the name is correct, it must be him. Mrs. Chen hesitated and said, from what I know, old celestial Master Lu has lived for more than 200 years. He has not left the mountain for more than 50 years. I wonder how Taoist priest Zhang should address this old celestial master. Zhang Yan smiled faintly and said, if he calls me junior brother when we meet, it will be an advantage for him. The maidservant, who was standing to the side, couldn't help but burst into laughter when she heard this. Chen Jisher was displeased and said, Qiao, what's so funny? Qiao, was not afraid of him and said, this Taoist priest is not even 20 years old, but he became brothers with Daoren, who is more than 200 years old. He even said that the old celestial master took advantage of him. Master might not find it funny, but I do. Chen Jisher also felt that this matter was unimaginable, but he could not understand the mysteries of Taoism. Thus, he simply shook his head and did not say anything. On the other hand, Mrs. Chen did not dare to look down on Zhang Yan. She lived at the foot of Baofeng Mountain when she was young and had seen many extraordinary people with her uncle. She scolded, Qiao, don't talk nonsense. Taoist priest Zhang's background is not something you can guess. Qiao, was not convinced. She only muttered but did not dare to refute. Although Mrs. Chen felt that Zhang Yan's words were unbelievable, she could see that he was not a swindling Taoist. Just as she was about to apologize, she suddenly saw a colorful boat on the river. From a few hundred feet away, she could faintly hear the sound of flute and jade board. She could not help but change her expression. Chen Jisher saw this and was also shocked. He said, oh no, it's that Taoist Ma. How did he know that we are going to pass by here today? Oh no, oh no. He stamped his feet as he said this. Qiao saw this and her face was filled with fear. Her whole body was trembling. Mrs. Chen was silent for a moment and sighed, I'm afraid we can't avoid this today. It's a pity that the baby in my stomach has not even been born and will have to accompany mother to the underworld. She then bowed to Zhang Yan and said apologetically, "It's just that I have implicated Taoist Zhang. I feel very bad." Zhang Yan said with a dull expression, "Mrs. Chen, what is the background of this Taoist Ma?" Mrs. Chen sighed and said, "That Taoist Ma received the teachings of a strange person in his early years. He created a sinister spell that can take lives. 20 years ago, my uncle could not stand it and fought with him. In the end, he injured him with a sword. My uncle saw that it was not easy for him to cultivate, so he let him go. He only took an instrument from him as compensation and hoped that he would turn over a new leaf. All these years, nothing happened. But a few days ago, this person heard that my uncle had passed away and came to seek revenge. I was hoping to avoid this person, but who knew?" She shook her head and obviously did not have much hope. On the colorful boat sat a Taoist with white hair and a white beard. He looked like an immortal, but his eyes were malicious and flickering. A servant beside him pulled up his sleeves and scolded, "That bitch still wants to escape. She doesn't know that elder ancestor has supernatural powers. He only needs to pinch his fingers to know her movements." Daoren had his eyes closed and did not move. Now, he opened his eyes and said, "That day, old devil Cheng slashed me with a sword and took away the soul-gathering bell that was passed down from my master. Now that he is dead, the bell must be with his niece. Daoren, how can I let her go?" He looked up at the sky and saw that the sun had set. He laughed and said, "It's time to start the spell." The servant was quick-witted and immediately brought out an incense burner and placed it on the incense burner respectfully. Daoren coughed and stood up. He placed 3 incense sticks on the incense burner and then took out a stack of talisman paper and placed it on the table. He took out his magic sword and walked in mysterious steps while chanting. Finally, he pointed his magic sword and a black gas rushed up to the sky. It turned into the head of a ferocious ghost and pounced towards the boat. When the servant Xiao saw it, she immediately screamed in fear. The boatman also looked stunned. Chen Jisher was only a scholar and had never seen such a ferocious ghost. He was so scared that his legs trembled. If he did not hold on to the side of the boat, he would have fallen off the boat. Target =_blank. Chapter 211. Karma Entanglement. Master and disciple Fate. Everyone on the ship had different reactions when faced with this ferocious ghost head. Although Madame Chen's face was a little pale, she still appeared calm. She took a deep breath and her full chest rose and fell. She took out a white porcelain bottle out of nowhere and pulled out the cork. She shook it in the air and a wisp of green smoke curled up. The ghost head was hit by the green smoke and somersaulted in the air. However, it did not seem to suffer any damage. After shaking the head, it still rushed forward. This time, Madame Chen could not think of anything else. She let go of the porcelain bottle and let it fall to the ground. She smiled sadly, as if she had accepted her fate. Behind the incense burner table, Priest Ma chuckled and said, "That year, this old devil Cheng used this exorcism smoke to break my 5 ghosts technique. Daoren, I, as a living devil, have trained hard for more than 20 years and have harvested 108 evil spirits to refine. How can I compare to that year? If that old devil hadn't died early, I would have returned the humiliation I suffered back then." Zhang Yan saw the ghost head open its mouth and bite towards him. The wind was gloomy, as if it wanted to swallow everyone on the ship. He stretched out his hand and pointed at the air. A gust of wind swept up in the air. In the blink of an eye, the sky seemed to be washed away by a strong wind. All the ghost heads disappeared, as if the scene just now was just an illusion. His face flashed with disdain. This method of controlling the ghost head was crude. It was nothing more than capturing a few vengeful spirits and then refining a demon head in a evil land. Apart from being able to eat human souls, it had no other spiritual power. It was very unorthodox. This method seemed to be recorded in the Devil's sect's source-seeking scripture, but it seemed to be learned. However, this was also common sense. It must be known that the majority of the cultivation methods in the world were written in erosion scrolls. No one would casually give away the cultivation methods that they had painstakingly obtained to others. Even if there were a few that were left in the outside world, it would only be a word or two, and it wouldn't amount to much. This priest Ma had not even reached the realm of opening meridian. Zhang Yan really had no interest in fighting him. He took out a talisman from his sleeve and pointed at it. A mysterious light attached to it. He said lightly, "Zhang Pan, use this talisman to get rid of this person." Zhang Pan respectfully received it with both hands. He turned and walked on the water. He was a monster of the sea and was familiar with the water. In a flash, he arrived in front of the ship. Priest Ma was shocked and angry to see the ghost head broken. He also saw Zhang Pan walking on the water as if he was walking on flat ground. He then saw Zhang Pan walking on the water as if it was flat ground. Zhang Pan only knows how to follow his master's orders, he wouldn't care about him. He slapped the talisman and a golden light like a sword appeared in the air and chopped downwards. Before Priest Ma could even make a sound, his head was chopped off. Blood spurted out from his mouth and his headless body fell to the ground with a thud. The servant beside him felt the hot liquid splashing on his face. He touched it and suddenly screamed and ran away in fear. Zhang Pan controlled the talisman and the golden light chased after the servant and killed him. He then returned to the ship to hand over his life. Lady Chen thought she was going to die, but suddenly the situation changed. Priest Ma was easily killed by a servant beside Zhang Yan. She was stunned and couldn't believe it. It was only when Zhang Pan turned around that she came to her senses. She knelt down in front of Zhang Yan and cried tears of joy, "I didn't expect Priest Zhang to have such power. Today it was Priest Zhang who saved our lives. We will repay this kindness." Zhang Yan raised his hand and said with a smile, "Lady Chen, no need to be so courteous. Please stand up and talk." Lady Chen felt a gentle force coming towards her and she stood up involuntarily. She was even more shocked. And that Chen Jishir looked like he had lost his soul, his whole body was trembling, his mouth kept repeating words like, "Evil Taoist, evil Taoist." Whether it was the ghost head, or the bloody scene when Priest Ma was killed, they all really scared him out of his wits. Zhang Yan looked at him and said, "Lady Chen, your husband doesn't like Taoists?" Lady Chen went up and gently patted Chen Jishir's back. She sighed, "Priest Zhang, please forgive me. My husband is only a scholar and has never seen such a strange thing. It's hard to avoid being frightened. He wasn't this disgusted before. It's just that he encountered a strange thing a few days ago." Zhang Yan asked, "Oh? I wonder what strange thing it is. Can you tell I about it?" Lady Chen seemed to find it hard to speak. She hesitated for a while before telling him the whole story. One day when Chen Jishir was reading in the study room, he suddenly saw a white-haired Daoran passing through the room. He shouted a few questions but this Daoran did not stop. Instead, he went straight into Lady Chen's bedroom. Chen Jishir was furious and wanted to pull him back. Who knew that Daoran shook his sleeve and he tumbled. After the shock, he was shocked and woke up with a start. He realized that it was just a dream. But the strange thing was that from that day on, Lady Chen became pregnant. After that, Chen Jishir was always suspicious and felt uneasy. He suspected that there was something unclean in the house and he became nervous. Finally Lady Chen was helpless. She remembered that there was an ancestral house at the foot of Zhurong Mountain. Her uncle also cultivated in Baofeng Monastery and was good at exorcising ghosts. So she moved her family here. Who would have thought that just as she arrived, she heard the bad news of her uncle's death. When it rains, it pours. That priest Ma came looking for them and wanted them to hand over the soul-gathering bell. Because she remembered that there were a few familiar Taoists in Baofeng Monastery who could be protected, Lady Chen and her family wanted to hide here. That was how they met Zhang Yan on the river. After listening, Zhang Yan's eyes flashed and he slowly said, "I dare to ask, before Lady Chen married, was your surname Tian and lived in Hantong County's Yenzhou City?" Lady Chen said with admiration, yes. I didn't expect Priest Zhang to be proficient in divination. You didn't make any mistakes. After listening, Zhang Yan seemed to understand and nodded his head. The last trace of doubt in his heart was wiped away. Originally, he should have gone to Hantong County to settle this karma. But now this family moved thousands of miles from the north to live in the south. Coincidentally, they met again here. This should be the result of the karma between the two parties. After thinking it through, he smiled and said, I won't hide it from Lady Chen. It's not that I'm proficient in divination. The reason why I came here today is because I was meditating and comprehending the will of heaven. Suddenly, I had a sudden impulse and realized that my future disciple was going to cross this river. So I came here to wait. But my cultivation is shallow. I only know that my disciple's surname is Tian and where she came from. But I don't know which one. Now it seems that Lady Chen's child is my good disciple. Lady Chen was startled at first, then she was overjoyed. She held her stomach and said, is that true? That's my child's good fortune. Nowadays, people did not mourn for their disciples who became monks. Instead, it was because Taoists had a high status and could be exempted from taxes and food. There was even a saying, when a person becomes a deity, his chickens and dogs will ascend to heaven. Whenever something miraculous happened in a place, the imperial court would set up a monument and reduce taxes and corvée. It could be said that it benefited the village and everyone was honored. But there was a difference between a disciple from a big Taoist school and a Taoist from a normal Taoist temple. From Lady Chen's point of view, Zhang Yan had cultivation and seemed to have a relationship with Baofeng Temple. This child had become his disciple before he was born. This was a good karma from the heavens, so she could not help but be surprised. By this time, the ferry had unknowingly reached the other side of the river. At the ferry crossing, there was a patrol officer with a dozen or so soldiers holding torches and carrying lanterns, patrolling the area. Every passenger ship that passed by had to be inspected, hoping to get something out of it. But seeing that Zhang Yan was standing on this ferry, they all took a wide detour, not daring to come up and cause trouble. At this time, Chen Jisher had regained some color. Seeing this scene, he sat at the back of the boat and sighed, not worshipping the saints but ghosts and deities. How can we scholars live? How can we live? Lady Chen wanted to comfort him, but after hearing this, her lips opened but she did not know where to start. Zhang Yan looked at Jurong Mountain in the night and said, Lady Chen, I am going to see Monastery Head Lu. Where would you like to go? I can order my child to escort you. Since Zhang Wuji and her child were master and disciple, they were not strangers. Madame Chen did not refuse and said in a natural and unrestrained manner, Thank you very much, Taoist Zhang. My uncle also has a few rooms here. I would like to stay there tonight. Zhang Yan nodded slightly and gave some instructions to Zhang Pan. Then, with a wave of his sleeve, a cloud of smoke rose from his feet and flew into the sky. This action made Lady Chen even more surprised. Chen Jisher, on the other hand, stared blankly and murmured, riding on the clouds, could this Taoist Zhang be an immortal? Zhang Yan circled around in the sky and could clearly see that this Baofeng monastery on the mountain did not have any restrictive spell or formation, so it was easy to enter and exit. He rode the wind to the highest temple on the mountain and pressed down on the cloud. After 3 or 5 turns, he arrived in front of a side room surrounded by spiritual energy. He saw a child dozing off at the door, so he went forward and shook him awake. The child woke up with a start. When he saw Zhang Yan, he almost shouted out, Taoist, where did you come from? Zhang Yan smiled and said, Don't panic. Go in and tell your master that when the time comes for the immortal herb that day, he will understand. The Taoist child was good at reading people's expressions. There were people patrolling at the foot of the mountain, but Zhang Yan was able to appear here without anyone noticing. Seeing that Zhang Yan was friendly, the Taoist child quickly said, Taoist, please wait for a moment, I will go and tell my master. Not long after the Taoist child entered the room, there was a loud noise in the side room. It seemed like a table or chair had been knocked over. A middle-aged Taoist with half black and half dry hair and only half a beard ran out barefooted. He was excited and said with a trembling voice, "Is it the senior martial brother of the sect?" Zhang Yan saw that this Taoist was emitting a spiritual light. It was obvious that he was at the mystic light realm. He nodded to himself. It was rare for this person to be able to cultivate to such a level without anyone's guidance. He bowed and said, "Is it senior martial brother Lu Tianying? I, Zhang Yan. I came from Taozhenren." Lu Tianying originally had some doubts, but when he heard the name, Taozhenren, he no longer had any doubts. He was overjoyed and quickly bowed to return the greeting. Only then did he remember that his clothes were messy, which made him a little embarrassed. Zhang Yan saw that he was messy and his hair was sparse. It seemed like it was caused by someone, so he asked, "Taoist Lu is also a temple master, why do you look like this?" Lu Tianying calmed down after the initial excitement and sighed, "Sigh, it's a long story. Senior martial brother, please come in and talk." He then ordered the Taoist child, "Go make a pot of cloud dragon cattail tea." The Taoist child was smart and ran out. After the two of them entered the room and took their seats, Lu Tianying pulled his beard and said with a bitter smile, "I won't hide it from senior brother. Junior brother's current appearance is all because of those kids from the Supreme Sky sect. #target =_ blank. Chapter 212. Hearing this, Zhang Yan found it strange. Although this Lu Yaoying was Tao Xinjin's disciple, not many people knew about this. Although this person was a mystic light realm cultivator, on the surface, he was just a lone cultivator. Taihao school was one of the top 10 sects of the Xian sect. Why would their disciples make things difficult for him? Zhang Yan thought for a while and looked at Lu Yingyao. He said, "Does junior brother Lu know about this Taihao school?" Lu Daojin shook his head and said, "I've always been cultivating in the temple and don't go down the mountain often because I'm afraid of causing trouble. I only heard from those two kids that they're disciples of Taihao school, but I don't know much about Taihao school. There's no pop-up window." Zhang Yan nodded and thought, this junior brother Lu is someone who's focused on seeking Tao, but he's been in the mortal world for a long time. He probably doesn't know anything about the cultivation world, so it's not strange that he doesn't know about Taihao school. No wonder he only has resentment in his words and no fear. So it's because the ignorant are fearless. Seeking Tao wasn't easy. Normal lone cultivators would more or less make a few friends. Not only could they find treasures together, but they could also help each other if they met a strong enemy. However, Lu Yaoying's experience was unique. He was originally the head of Baofeng Temple, and he was a monk in the mortal world. Tao Xinjin taught him a cultivation technique that helped him open his meridians, and he was given the cloud sand early on. He was able to cultivate peacefully for more than 100 years, and although he didn't have any experience, he still managed to reach the mystic light realm. However, because of this, he knew nothing about the cultivation world. Zhang Yan asked again, "Since junior brother is focused on cultivating and doesn't cause trouble, why did the disciples of Taihao school come looking for you?" Lu Yaoying sighed, patted his knee, and said, "Senior brother, you should know that I ate a spirit herb by mistake. At that time, my internal organs were on fire, and I almost lost my life. Coincidentally, Master happened to pass by, and not only did he save my life, he even took me in as an in-name disciple. That spirit herb left behind many seeds, and I took 3 of them and buried them in the ground. Over 100 years have passed, and nothing has happened. But in the middle of the month, one of the spirit herbs suddenly sprouted green." Zhang Yan's heart moved and he stood up. "Where is this grass? Junior brother, take me to it." There was an undeniable meaning in his words. Lu Yaoying hesitated for a moment, then stood up and said, "Senior brother, this way please." The two left the side room and walked to the backyard. Not long after, they saw a vegetable field surrounded by a fence. Lu Yaoying pointed to an inconspicuous corner and said, "Senior brother, please take a look." I was afraid that someone would notice something was wrong, so I planted this grass here to hide it from others. Zhang Yan took a few glances at the grass. In the eyes of ordinary people, the grass was exceptionally inconspicuous, but in his eyes, it was surrounded by spiritual energy. As soon as he approached it, he felt a cool feeling, brighter than the stars in the night sky. No wonder it was discovered. He walked closer and sighed, so it's the dragon flame fragrant tongue grass. Lu Yaoying was surprised, senior brother knows this thing. Back then, when master saw it, he didn't know what it was. Zhang Yan wasn't surprised that Tao Xinjin didn't know this thing. He had never seen this kind of spirit grass before. However, he had once studied under Zhou Chengju, and this alchemy grandmaster had a lot of books on all kinds of rare plants. He could guess the origin of this thing with just a bit of comparison. Zhang Yan laughed coldly and said, "If it's this grass, then it's no wonder. This spirit grass is one of the few things in the world that can prolong one's life, but no one knows how to grow it. No wonder it's coveted by others." He then looked at Lu Yaoying and thought, this junior brother Lu is really lucky. It's been 200 years, but he's still only at the mystic light realm. He doesn't even have a single strand of white hair on his head. It must be because of this medicine. Lu Yaoying didn't notice the look in Zhang Yan's eyes and said angrily, "Those two kids from Taihao School are only 11 or 12 years old, but they're so arrogant. They said this thing was left behind by an elder of their sect and wanted me to hand it over. However, this spirit grass was something I obtained 100 years ago, and now that I've grown it, I'm going to give it to teacher's family. How can I give it to them? Because of this, I fought with them. Their magic power isn't as strong as mine, but they have a treasure that can release fire." He pointed at the messy beard on his face and smiled bitterly. Junior brother is like this because of that treasure. Those two kids even said that if I don't hand it over, they'll come and burn me again when my beard and hair grow back. I don't even dare to come out and see my sect's disciples. Zhang Yan's eyebrows rose up slightly and felt that it was strange. He knew the personalities of the disciples of big sects very well. They wouldn't hesitate to steal something that could increase their lifespan from someone like Lu Yaoying who didn't have any background. If they tried to stop them, they wouldn't mind killing them. It could be said that they were cold-blooded and had no warmth to speak of. If they really were disciples of Taihao School, why didn't they kill him and instead threatened him? His thoughts changed, and he looked up, "Junior brother Lu, let me see the light." Lu Yaoying was startled at first, but then he happily agreed, thinking that this senior brother Zhang was testing his cultivation. His face was full of confidence, and he silently circulated the essence qi in his chest. After a short while, a ball of green light about 30 feet in size was released from his head, rippling like clear water, like a pool of jade spring. Zhang Yan nodded his head and thought that this was probably part of Tao Xinjin's plan. Although Lu Yaoying was only at the first level of the mystic light realm, his cultivation was profound. One could tell that he cultivated a technique of the Xian gate with just one glance, but he couldn't tell where he came from. If he knew where you came from, he would be able to deal with you, but if he didn't know where you came from, he wouldn't dare to act rashly. From his point of view, this Lu Yaoying should have been training in the mortal world, but he was able to reach the mystic light realm and cultivate a technique of the Xian gate. Maybe he was a chess piece of a senior that didn't want him to know. If Lu Yaoying killed him, wouldn't he be making enemies for no reason? This kind of thing was a taboo, so Zhang Yan was sure that someone from Taihao School had the spiritual grass, but he could tell that Lu Yaoying's background wasn't simple, so he didn't dare to use force and send a few juniors to test him. It would be best if Daoren was willing to give in, but if he didn't, he would most likely ask for help from the sect after being humiliated. At that time, Zhang Yan would be able to change the situation. If he couldn't offend them, he would retreat, and if he could, he would have nothing to worry about. Zhang Yan snickered coldly in his heart. Since he was here, he wouldn't let the other party do as he pleased. He said in a deep voice, "Junior brother Lu, don't worry, leave this matter to me." Lu Yaoying could not help but heave a sigh of relief. For 100 years, he only knew how to cultivate, but in his heart, he was extremely afraid of fighting with others. However, he hesitated for a moment, then stammered, "I wonder if senior brother is here on behalf of master." Seeing Lu Yaoying look at him, Zhang Yan knew that Lu Yaoying wanted to ask if he could be accepted into the sect by Tao Zhen. However, he also admired Lu Daojin's will and perseverance. If it was any other person, after waiting for more than 100 years without anyone coming to receive them, Tao Zhenjin would have accepted him as a disciple with such a firm and unwavering heart. He smiled and said, "Junior brother Lu, I know your intentions. I'll send a Dao flying talisman back to the sect, and there will be a reply in half a month at most. Just relax and wait." Lu Yaoying looked excited and bowed. "Thank you, senior brother." Zhang Yan nodded slightly. "Please prepare a quiet room for me, junior brother Lu. I want to stay here for a few days." Lu Yaoying hurriedly nodded in agreement. He called the boy over, gave him a few instructions, and then led Zhang Yan to a wing in the east. When Zhang Yan entered the room, he saw that the bed was clean, the walls were white, and the incense burner was burning. He nodded in satisfaction and sat cross-legged on the bed. He then took out a flying talisman from his sleeve. This item was called the 10,000 Miles Smoke Wave Talisman. It was used by the Clear Feather sect to send messages. He raised his hand and used his spiritual chi to write a letter. With a flick of his finger, the talisman passed through the room and headed east. After this matter was settled, he sat in silence for a moment before taking out a book and a scroll from his sleeve and slowly unfolding it. This was a treasure that the Xian Tong Demon King gave him when he was cultivating in the Clear Feather sect. It was called the Thousand Illusion Jade Mirror. This picture recorded the appearance of 203 people. There were men and women, old and young, and they were all vivid and lifelike. When using this picture, one only needed to chant a spell to change one's appearance to be the same as the person in the picture. When this picture was in his hands, Zhang Yan used the opportunity of the Dao discussion to refine it for Tao Zhenjin. Once he used this item to change his appearance, unless the Grotto Heaven True Realm looked carefully, no one would be able to see any flaws. This time, he didn't wait to cultivate to the third level of the Mystic Light Realm before returning to the East Flower Continent. He wanted to participate in the Ganoderma meeting of Taihao School. During this meeting, Taihao School would take out a good, 1 Chi Ganoderma, for those who were interested to fight for it. However, there was a limited number of 1 Chi Ganoderma. Therefore, every sect's disciples fought fiercely for it. There was another troublesome matter. Without a recommendation from a disciple of the Taihao School, no one had the right to go. Previously, Zhang Yan had killed several disciples of the Supreme Sky sect, and among them were 2 true disciples, Chu Jiu and Seng Han. They had died because they had fought over the immortal abode with him. For such a matter, if you wanted to kill someone else but were killed by him, the sect would definitely not stand up for you. Therefore, even if he went to Taihao School openly, they wouldn't dare to do anything to him. However, they couldn't even think about fighting for the 1 Chi Ganoderma. Therefore, Zhang Yan could only change his identity to make it more convenient for him to do things. Originally, he had a plan. He wanted to create a few coincidences to meet a disciple of the Taihao School and get their recommendation to participate in the Ganoderma meeting. However, now that he heard that a disciple of Taihao School was looking for Baofeng Temple, he had another plan. Zhang Yan stayed in Baofeng Temple for 10 days. On this day, a golden talisman flew over from the east. He stretched out his hand to take a look. It was the work of Tao Zhenjin. After a few glances, he smiled faintly and called the boy at the door in. He said, "Go and call your master." The boy left to carry out the order. A short while later, Lu Yaoying stepped into the room and bowed. "Greetings, senior brother Zhang." Zhang Yan shook his hand and placed the talisman into Lu Yaoying's hands. He said, "This is the work of Sect Master Tao. Junior brother Lu can take a look." Lu Yaoying's hands were trembling. He held the talisman in his hands and looked at it several times. In the end, he let out a long sigh. Hot tears flowed down his face. He said, "After 100 years of hard work, I finally have a place in the sect." Zhang Yan nodded. Junior brother Lu, with this talisman, you can fly tens of thousands of miles across the sea at any time and return to the sect to pay a visit to Sect Master Tao. Lu Yaoying bowed deeply to Zhang Yan. He said sincerely, this time, it is all thanks to senior brother. Junior brother is very grateful. Zhang Yan smiled lightly. He said, in that case, why don't junior brother Lu give me the stalk of spirit grass outside the door? Lu Yaoying was taken aback. He was not ignorant of the ways of the world. He thought to himself, originally, I wanted to give this thing to master when he comes here and beg him to accept me into the inner sect. However, I don't know when this stalk of spirit grass will mature. I have to leave this place in a few days, so it seems that won't be possible. I might as well give these seeds to master when I return. I might as well go with the flow. Therefore, he immediately agreed. Since senior brother likes it, then junior brother will give it to senior brother. Zhang Yan laughed brightly. Okay, then junior brother can stay for a few more days. I have a good show that I need senior brother's cooperation. Although Lu Yaoying had some doubts, he agreed without hesitation. I will listen to senior brother's instructions. Junior brother, watch carefully. After today, I will appear with this face. Zhang Yan flicked his sleeves and took out the Thousand Illusions Illustrated Handbook. His eyes focused on the image of a young man with great strength and vigor. He chanted an incantation, and the figure in the painting swayed and walked down to merge with him. Under Lu Yaoying's shocked gaze, Zhang Yan slowly stood up. At this moment, he was a tall and handsome young man with bulging muscles, valiant and high-spirited, cloud-like shoes on his feet and a flying scarf on his head. Zhang Yan took out a pair of iron hammers from his sleeve. This was a divine weapon given to him by Xiaoyao Demon Queen. When he chanted a spell, he could use it to attack. From this moment on, he would travel with the identity of a strength path cultivator and participate in the Ganoderma convention. Since I've changed my identity, I'll change my name. I'll be called. Zhang Yan looked down at the hammers and suddenly thought of a name. His eyes flashed and he laughed. I'll be called Li Yuanba. To be continued. Target equals _blank. Chapter 213. The Qin couple stayed at the foot of Baofeng Mountain for a night. Although Ma Daojin was killed by Zhang Yan, it was inevitable that they were still on tenterhooks. Especially Qin Jishe, who had several nightmares that night. He was drenched in cold sweat. Every time, he dreamed that Ma Daojin would turn into a malicious ghost and come to his door, wanting to eat his heart and liver. Strange no pop-up window. Chen Fujin was not afraid at all, but she could empathize with her husband. She comforted him, husband, don't be alarmed. With Zhang Daozhang's boy guarding the door, no malicious ghost will be able to enter. Even if it really comes to the door, it will just be killed again. These words were actually nonsense. Not to mention that primordial spirits had not cultivated and did not have the ability to harm people. Even a real malicious spirit would not dare to touch the bad luck and come to the foot of Zhurong Mountain where Baofeng Temple was located to commit murder. But these words were enough to make Chen Jishe feel at ease. Chen Jishe recalled the scene of the Daozhang treading on the water and killing his way in as if he was mowing grass. Although he still trembled at the thought of the bloody scene, his fear had indeed calmed down quite a bit. He let out a long sigh and said, Wife, I heard everything you said to Zhang Daojin during the day. Do you really want to send our child to learn the Tao from Zhang Daojin? Chen Fujin suddenly turned her head and stared at Qin Jishe. She said in a low voice, Husband, are you not willing? Chen Jishe looked at the beam in the room and said, It's not that I'm not willing, it's just that our Chen family has few descendants, and I still don't have anyone to carry on the family line. If this son, Chen Fujin pushed him and said, I don't even know whether the child in my stomach is a boy or a girl. How come you have a son? I'm still young. If this child becomes Zhang Daozhang's disciple, I'll give birth to another child for your Chen family to carry on the family line. Towards the end, her cheeks were slightly red. Chen Jishe did not speak. Not only can he ride the clouds, but he can also predict the past and the future. Even when I was in Baofeng Temple, I have never seen a Taoist with such supernatural powers. He is clearly an immortal. If our child can become his disciple, it will be a great blessing. If he achieves Tao in the future, you and I will also be able to benefit from it. We will take some elixirs and live longer than Chang Jin. At least we will not have to worry about food and clothing for the rest of our lives. We might even be able to set up a monument and be worshipped. Chen Fujin only said these words to dispel his husband's worries, but Chen Jishe remained silent. After a long while, he asked, "Wife, how many months are you pregnant?" Chen Fujin glared at him and said with dissatisfaction, "How could you forget this? It's already been 8 months. Chen Jishe sighed and said, "I was thinking that if it wasn't for this child, I'm afraid there wouldn't be so many problems." When Chen Fujin heard this, she was slightly annoyed and said angrily, "How can you think that way? It's clearly my child who brought us good fortune." She turned her back to Chen Jishe and did not dare to talk to him anymore. Chen Jishe sighed and put his hand on Chen Fujin's shoulder and said, "Wife is right, it's your husband's fault." Chen Fujin twisted her body and threw a little tantrum, but finally turned around and said in a low voice, "Then from now on, you are not allowed to say bad things about my child." "Yes," Chen Jishe smiled bitterly and said, "I'll listen to my wife." But he silently said in his heart, 2 more months. His hand that was being hit tightly clenched into a fist. Chen Fujin was completely unaware of this. After a while, her breathing became heavy and she had already fallen asleep. Zhang Pan, who was outside, had sharp ears and eyes, so he heard the conversation between the husband and wife clearly. However, he was a demon and did not understand the ways of the world, so he did not understand the meaning behind their words. If it were Mountain River Boy here, he would probably be able to sense that something was wrong. Across the river, under the crescent moon, a middle-aged Taoist dressed in an 8 trigrams robe stared at the mountain on the other side of the river. He stomped his feet and cursed, "That old Taoist Ma is a piece of trash." What was supposed to be a sure thing was ruined by him. A broad-faced man in short attire with a calm expression said, "I've sent someone to check the ferry and drag the colorful boat back. The corpses of Priest Ma and his servant are full of cut marks. It seems that they were killed by a sharp weapon like a flying sword. I heard that it was done by a Taoist from Baofeng Monastery." Baofeng Temple. The Taoist was taken aback and frowned. "Master once said that Monastery Master Lu is quite skilled and told us not to provoke him for no reason. This matter is a little tricky." The broad-faced man said coldly, "No matter how difficult it is, we must do it. The soul convening bell is still in that girl's hands. Without it, the 6 spirit bells will not be complete. Now that the Baoji conference is about to begin, without this instrument, how can young master display his power?" The Taoist thought for a while and shook his head. "Your young master is really something. The Baoji conference is filled with masters who can fly. Although he has learned Tao, he has not opened his meridians. His cultivation may not be as high as yours, what use is there for him to go?" The Taoist snorted and said, "Young master is talented and has been taken in by an old immortal. How can you and I speculate? Fortunately, there is still some time before the Baoji conference. We can just find another opportunity." The Taoist snorted and seemed to be somewhat disapproving. Zhang Yan meditated and cultivated in Baofeng Temple every day. For half a month, he appeared as Li Yuanba and addressed Lu Yaoying as junior brother. There were more than 20 disciples in Lu Yaoying's monastery. 5 of them were conferred as 3rd-grade Taoist masters by Emperor Yongding of Great Liang, while the other 2 were cultivating in the monastery. All of them were old Taoists with white hair and youthful faces. They did not know where this young uncle master came from. Although they were unwilling, they could only follow the rules and call him Uncle Master. Zhang Yan was wondering if the 2 kids who claimed to be disciples of Taihao School were not coming. He waited until the end of the month. On this day, he was meditating in the quiet room when he heard someone shouting at the door, "Lu Daoren, I am here again." Come out quickly, let me pluck your beard. When Lu Yaoying heard this voice, his heart relaxed for no reason. He felt his mind was unprecedentedly calm. If there were no accidents, after today, he would be able to go overseas and return to the sect. Thinking of this, he became excited. He tidied up his Taoist robe and strode out of the courtyard. Stroking his beard, he smiled and said, "Two Taoists are here again. But I'm afraid you two won't be able to pluck my beard today, Daoren." Two people stood in front of him. One was a fair-skinned boy. He stood on a flying gourd and imitated the Taoist with his hands behind his back, looking down arrogantly. The other was a 13 or 14-year-old girl. Her eyes were like limpid autumn waters, but there was a hint of cleverness on her face. She was standing on a banana leaf. When she saw Lu Yaoying, she bowed and said, "Fellow Taoist Lu, my little brother is not sensible. I apologize." Lu Yaoying's eyelids twitched. Not sensible? Why didn't she say that when she wanted to burn my eyebrows with the gourd? However, his mind was currently focused on going to Clear Feather Sect, so he was not in the mood to argue with these two. He said in a deep voice, "You don't have to waste your breath. I'd rather destroy that dragon flame fragrant tongue grass than take it out." The girl was surprised and said, "Fellow Taoist Lu only knows the name of this spirit herb?" Lu Yaoying replied, "What a joke. This spirit herb was planted here by I, so how could I not know?" The girl shook her head and said, "Fellow Taoist Lu, why do you have to say such lies? This herb was clearly lost here by an elder of my clan 100 years ago. How did it become yours?" Lu Yaoying smiled and pointed at his Taoist bun. "You don't have to say anything else. My hair and beard are here. If you have the ability, go ahead and burn them again." The girl thought to herself, this Taoist Lu was so timid last time, but he's so tough today. Could it be that he's brought someone from the sect over like little Marshall uncle said? This time, my little brother and I came out without little Marshall uncle's knowledge. We have to be careful. Thinking of this, her eyes revealed a vigilant look. The boy beside her could not hold it in anymore. He clapped his hands excitedly and shouted, "Daoren, just you wait. Watch my wind and fire gourd." Just as he was about to make a move, the young girl's expression changed, and she hurriedly pulled her brother to the side. A black shadow flew past where they were just standing, producing a muffled whistling sound, and the wind that swept up caused their robes to flutter. There was a rumble on the other side, and the walls collapsed. Smoke and dust flew everywhere. The girl was shocked. When she took a closer look, she realized that the object was actually a copper hammer the size of a person's head. Thinking about how this thing had almost hit her, her face turned pale. At this moment, Zhang Yan walked out from the backyard. He was playing the role of a mighty young man, so he shouted, causing the roof tiles to tremble and dust to fall. He said, "Where did this brat come from? You dare to make things difficult for my senior brother?" He had seen them from behind just now. These two were only at the light Qi realm. It was just that Lu Yaoying's cultivation was too smooth and did not know how to fight with cultivators. Otherwise, how could these two be a match for a mystic light realm cultivator? When she saw Zhang Yan walk out, the young woman's bright eyes sized him up and said, "So you're the reinforcement that old Taoist Lu invited?" While speaking, her hand quietly reached into the pouch on her waist and suddenly took out a hairpin. With a shake of her hand, she threw the hairpin towards Zhang Yan. Zhang Yan laughed coldly, but he did not dodge. With a clang, the hairpin hit his forehead and bounced away. The girl frowned and waved her hand to take the hairpin back. She found that the tip of the hairpin had been broken, and she was shocked. Although she only did this to test Zhang Yan's strength, a normal flying sword might not be able to make a dent in it, let alone a body made of flesh and blood. His body was so strong that only a strength path cultivator could have this ability. Strength Dao cultivators cooked external herbs and watered internal herbs. There were less than 1 in 100 strength Dao cultivators, but those who really stepped on this path were not ordinary people. The girl cursed in her heart. Originally, it was still difficult to deal with Lu Daoren, but now there was a person who called himself junior brother Lu Daoren, and it seemed like his cultivation was even higher. How could the two of them deal with him? Her eyes turned and she said, "Little brother, why aren't you taking out the treasure?" The boy replied with an, "Oh," and was about to take out the gourd when he felt his neck tighten. It was his big sister pulling him into the clouds. Zhang Yan took a deep breath and his chest puffed up. He then let out a ha and spat out a wave of air into the sky. This wave of air chased after them like a hurricane, and when it passed through the air, the two siblings felt the sky spin and the earth spin, and then they fell from the sky. Chapter 214. Copper Bamboo Talisman. The breath that Zhang Yan exhaled was like a raging wave rolling up the shore, almost blowing the two people down from the sky in an instant. The young girl turned pale with fright and hurriedly used a spell to summon Yi Yi and Ba Jiao over, firmly protecting her and the boys' bodies. Only then did they not get hurt. She flipped herself up from the ground and raised her head. Seeing Zhang Yan walking towards her, she subconsciously wanted to summon her magic treasure. But at this moment, she was frightened to realize that the aura around Zhang Yan's body was vigorous like a great river and big waves. The sand and gravel under his feet were actually rolling on the ground with each breath that he took. Seeing this scene, her heart trembled endlessly. She secretly cried out and thought to herself, "This person is so powerful. If he wanted to kill us two siblings, it would be as easy as flipping his palm. Just now he didn't make a ruthless move because he was worried about our Taihao school's prestige. It's just that if us two siblings continue to fight with him and provoke his ferocious nature, we would only suffer more." This thought quickly turned in her mind and she decided not to resist anymore. At this moment, she suddenly felt that the younger brother beside her couldn't help but want to make a move. Anxious, she hurriedly grabbed the boy's wrist and said in a low voice, "Younger brother, this person's cultivation far surpasses the two of us. You must not act rashly." Although the boy's little face was somewhat unconvinced, he always trusted his elder sister the most. Therefore, he only struggled for a moment and then stopped moving. Instead, he angrily glared at Zhang Yan. Zhang Yan strode over and finally stood in front of the two people. He looked down at them and shouted, "You two brats, tell me your names." Under his stern gaze, the young girl didn't dare to act rashly. She carefully replied, "My name is Yu Jing and this is my younger brother, Yu Song." Once Zhang Yan heard these two people's surnames, he had an idea in his heart. The surname Yu was a big family in the southern Xianmen. These two brats had Ming Qi cultivation at this age and also had magic treasures to protect themselves. They were definitely disciples of the Yu family. With them in his hands, the recommendation for the Ganoderma conference would be settled, and his painstaking acting wouldn't be in vain. He revealed a cold expression on his face instead as he said in a low voice, "Since all of you dared to cause trouble in Baofeng Monastery, I naturally won't let the matter go. However, out of consideration for your young age, I won't fuss about it with all of you. I'll capture all of you first, and I'll naturally explain it to the seniors of your sect once they arrive." The young girl secretly heaved a sigh of relief. As long as his life was not in danger, it was fine. She hesitated for a moment and said, "My little brother is still young and doesn't know anything. I hope that senior will let him go. I am willing to stay here." She still had a magic weapon with her. As long as she could send Yu Song out, she wouldn't have to worry about anything, and she could even think of a way to escape. Yu Song suddenly shouted, "Sister, I don't want to go. When my junior martial uncle comes, I'll teach him a lesson." Yu Jing jumped in fright and quickly covered his mouth. Zhang Yan was slightly surprised. He waved his hand and two talismans flew out and stuck to the two's forehead, sealing their qi orifices. Then, he picked them up with each hand and walked in front of Lu Tianying. He threw them at his feet and said, "Junior martial brother Lu, since these two have humiliated you, you can deal with them as you see fit. As long as they don't lose their lives, it's fine." Lu Tianying knew that Zhang Yan must have his own reasons for doing this. He had cultivated for more than 100 years, and if he wasn't forced too much, he wouldn't find trouble with the other party. Moreover, he was about to leave for the Eastern Sea, so he didn't care about this matter anymore. Thus, he shook his head and said, "Senior Marshal brother, do as you see fit." Suddenly, he wrinkled his brows and looked towards the sky. He saw a Taoist holding a horsetail whisk, stepping on a piece of jade green light. This Taoist's appearance wasn't shocking, but he stood perfectly straight. His eyes were as deep as an abyss, and his beard had a tinge of green. He cupped his hands towards Zhang Yan and Lu Tianying and said, "Greetings, fellow Taoists. I am Gongsun Mian, and the two people on the ground are I's nephew. How did they offend your esteemed monastery? If there's anything inappropriate, I hereby apologize." He looked polite on the surface, but in his heart, he was filled with hatred. He thought, ever since I entered Taihao school, when have I ever been so aggrieved? Yu Jing and her brother were the children of his junior marshal brother. This time, he had his eyes on the flaming dragon tongue grass, but he couldn't see through Lu Tianying's background, so he instigated the siblings to come up and test him. These few days, he had other important matters to attend to, so he didn't pay attention to this place. Who knew that the Yu Jing siblings would come here without him knowing? By the time he hurried over, the two of them had already been caught by Zhang Yan. If it was an ordinary Taoist cultivator, Gongsun Mian wouldn't care about the rules and would just kill them directly. However, it was obvious that Zhang Yan wasn't someone to be trifled with, and he didn't seem to care about Taihao School's reputation. Therefore, he could only hope to settle this matter with gentle means. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed, and with a leap, he arrived in front of Gongsun Mian. He stared at him and said, "Are you the elder of those two children?" When Zhang Yan got closer, Gongsun Mian only felt that the other party's aura was oppressive, as if a ferocious beast was crouching beside him. When Gongsun Mian's eyes stared at him, all the hairs on his body stood up, forcing him to almost jump up and make a move. Fortunately, his cultivation was deep, so he resisted the urge to retreat and said, "That's right." Zhang Yan shouted coldly, "Then I'd like to ask you, how do you discipline the younger generation? My senior brother's hair and beard were burned off by them, and he suffered such humiliation. This matter definitely can't be let go like this." Gongsun Mian's heart moved. He could tell that although Zhang Yan's words were fierce, he obviously left some leeway. It was obvious that there was room for discussion. He secretly let out a sigh of relief, and said unhurriedly, "Then how do you think we should deal with this? Please ask." Zhang Yan waved his hand and said, "It's not convenient to talk here. Fellow Taoist, please follow me to the room to talk." He got down from the cloud and walked towards the side room. However, after a few steps, he turned around and saw that Gongsun Mian didn't follow him. There seemed to be some hesitation on his face, so he stopped and sneered, "What's wrong? Taoist Gongsun, are you afraid that I'll eat you up?" Gongsun Mian knew that the other party was provoking him, but there was no doubt that the other party's words were full of disdain. He couldn't help but be angry. In addition, he was provoked by Zhang Yan's aura just now, so he also had the thought of not admitting defeat in his heart. Therefore, with a wave of his horsetail whisk, he also descended and walked inside. Although he pretended to be calm on the surface, he was still secretly vigilant in his heart. Once there was any movement, he would release his talisman to protect himself. After the two of them entered the room and sat down, Zhang Yan suddenly laughed, then glanced at Gongsun Mian. Gongsun Mian was a little puzzled at first, but when he saw Zhang Yan's glance sweep over, it was like a white knife was stabbing him, and his whole body felt cold. His heart thumped, and he secretly cried out, "Oh no!" Just now, he felt that the feeling coming from Zhang Yan was extremely strange, but he didn't think of anything else. At this moment, he suddenly felt that the other party was releasing an extremely fierce and domineering aura. This person was obviously a strength path cultivator. He suddenly felt regret in his heart. In a moment of confusion, he fell into a big trap. If it was outside the room, he could leave if he wanted. With his talisman, no one would be able to stop him. But here, within such a short distance, the other party was a strength path cultivator. If he wanted to kill someone, there wouldn't even be a gap for him to release his talisman. One punch would be enough to kill him. If his life and death were in the hands of others, what logic was there to speak of? He had already lost before even talking about it. He only felt that the other party's aura was like a raging wave, whistling like the tide, wave after wave. He was constantly placed between life and death, which made him feel extremely uncomfortable. Drops of cold sweat appeared on his forehead, and he secretly thought, today's matter is a lesson. If I go back and encounter such a situation again, even if I lose face, I definitely can't stand under a dangerous wall. He took a deep breath, and acted as if nothing had happened. He smiled and said, "How should I address you, fellow Taoist?" Zhang Yan saw that he still had the bearing of a disciple of a large sect, and nodded to himself. He straightened up and said, "I am Li Yuanba." As soon as he said this name, Gongsun Mian felt a violent and fierce aura rising from Zhang Yan, making him feel suffocated. He hurriedly calmed his mind, and cupped his hands, saying, "So it's fellow Taoist Li, may I know which sect does fellow Taoist come from?" Zhang Yan waved his hand and said, "I don't want to say my master's name. It's better if Brother Yuan doesn't know." Gongsun Mian was speechless. This person's refusal was so direct, and he didn't even want to find an excuse. How hateful. But people under low eaves had no choice but to lower their heads. Today, he had lost the opportunity, and every step he took was wrong, so he could only accept it. Zhang Yan pressed his hand down, and his body leaned forward, saying, "Fellow Taoist Gongsun, I'll get straight to the point. It's not hard for me to let these two kids go, as long as you promise me one thing." Gongsun Mian said, "Please say it, fellow Taoist." Zhang Yan said in a deep voice, "I've been learning from my master since I was young, and now I've reached the core formation stage. Therefore, I want to go to the Ganoderma convention to fight for a Ganoderma, but I don't have anyone I know to recommend me. Since you're a disciple of the Taihao school, if you're willing to recommend me, I'll write off all our past grievances, and you can take these two kids with you." Gongsun Mian secretly sneered. So it was because of the convention token, then he would have to play around a little. He shook his head and said, "Forgive me, fellow Taoist, but that token isn't that easy to get." Zhang Yan laughed coldly, and said, "Don't misunderstand, sir. I'm not here to beg you, I'm only here to make a condition. Do you see that dragon flame fragrant tongue grass outside the house? Do you think that this spiritual herb is worth a token? I don't believe that other than sir, there's no one in your sect who knows what it's worth." Gongsun Mian's expression changed. What Zhang Yan said was right, he knew his fellow disciple's temperament very well. If he could get this spiritual herb, he would most likely agree to this matter. He felt suffocated in his chest. A moment of carelessness had caused him to fall into the opponent's hands, suppressing him to the point where he had no power to fight back. Ever since he entered Tao, when had he ever suffered such a great loss? Grinning, he said helplessly, "Fine, then I'll do as fellow Taoist wishes." The Yu siblings were in Zhang Yan's hands, he didn't want to play any tricks, lest there be more complications. If the other wasn't satisfied and kept him here to exchange for the token, then that would be embarrassing. Therefore, he decisively took out a bamboo talisman from his sleeve, placed it on the table, and pointed at it, saying, "This is the copper bamboo talisman. With this, fellow Taoist can go to the Ganoderma convention." Zhang Yan picked it up and looked at it. This token was exactly as the rumors said, and in such a hurry, it was impossible for the other party to fake it. Now that everything went so smoothly, he couldn't help but nod in satisfaction. Right now, he was playing the role of a fierce and courageous warrior, so he didn't hide his emotions at all and laughed heartily towards the sky. Looking at his proud expression, Gongsun Mian's heart was filled with hatred. His eyes flickered, and he thought to himself, "Do you really think everything will be fine just because you got the token? If you dare to come to the convention, I'll see how you're going to get the Ganoderma of Unity. #target=_blank Chapter 215. In front of Purple Bamboo Mountain, Gongsuan Yuan's face darkened. He suppressed the displeasure in his heart and said, "Since I've already given you this talisman, can you release my 2 juniors?" Zhang Yan shook his head and said, "Not yet." Gongsun Mian's expression didn't look too good. He twitched the corner of his mouth and said, "Fellow Li, what do you mean by this?" In fact, he really wanted to point at Zhang Yan's face and say, "Could it be that you want to go back on your word?" However, he was afraid that saying this would make things worse and make the other party angry. In the end, he would be the one to suffer. Now that he had no trump cards in his hands, he could only hope that the other party wouldn't dare to disregard his identity as a disciple of Taihao School. Zhang Yan glanced at Gongsun Mian with a faint smile and said, "Fellow Gongsun, don't worry. Since I've already promised you, I naturally won't go back on my word. However, I also know that although this copper bamboo talisman is in my hands, it's not safe yet. If you're not satisfied, you only need to say that the talisman was lost or that it was taken away for no reason when you meet your fellow disciples. Then wouldn't I have lost for nothing?" This, Gongsun Mian's body trembled slightly. He didn't think that Zhang Yan would be so clear about the inside story of the Treasure Zoisha conference. Originally, he had indeed planned to wait for Zhang Yan to come in with the copper talisman and then put on a show of him being taken away. Even though he would lose face, he could use this as an excuse to take down Zhang Yan and get back the face he lost today. Zhang Yan stared at him and said slowly, "I can only be at ease if I follow you to the sect and meet the deacon of the Treasure Zoisha conference. Fellow Taoist will personally introduce me." Gongsun Yuan's heart trembled. A person who knew the inside story of the Treasure Zoisha conference was definitely not an ordinary individual cultivator. It seemed that his earlier guess was right. The person in the Baofeng temple definitely had some background. For a moment, he felt that the other party was a bit unfathomable. This was the first time he seriously sized up Zhang Yan, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't remember such a person. He asked doubtfully, "Fellow Taoist, who exactly are you?" Zhang Yan laughed and said, "Fellow Taoist Gongsun, you don't have to worry. Since I, Zhang Yan, am participating in this meeting, I will naturally follow the rules and etiquette." Gongsun Mian fell silent for a moment, and then a bitter smile appeared on his face. At this moment, he could only choose to believe the other party, and he said helplessly, "If that's the case, when will fellow Taoist leave with me?" Zhang Yan stood up and smiled. "Fellow Taoist, please wait here for a moment. I'll be right back." Gongsun Mian watched as Zhang Yan strode out of the door. Not long after, he heard a vague voice, and he hurriedly paid attention to it. At the door, Zhang Yan said to Lu Tianying, "Senior brother, I'm done here, you can leave now." Lu Tianying's voice came in, "Then take care, junior brother. I'll leave everything here to you, I'll go see Ancestral Master first." He couldn't hear what was said next, but he suddenly felt a golden light outside the house, and even inside the house, there was light and shadow flying, the candles swayed, and then a golden light soared into the sky, and disappeared in a flash. Gongsun Mian was shocked. He was a disciple of a large sect, and he had some knowledge. This light was clearly a flying talisman, a method to summon disciples from tens of thousands of miles away, or even more, back to the sect. Those who could use this method were at least enlightened masters. Moreover, the 2 words, Ancestral Master, were not casually called, they were at least the head of a sect, and just now was worthy of this title. He couldn't help but feel nervous. The origins of these 2 people might be greater than he imagined. Could it be? His thoughts suddenly turned to the 6 demon sects, and his expression couldn't help but turn cold. The people in Baofeng Temple acted strangely, their cultivation was obviously not weak, but they hid here, and Li Yuan by himself had never heard of them before. This kind of secretive way of doing things was very similar to the demon sect. No wonder. The 1 Chi-Ganoderma of my Taihao school has never been given to the cultivators of the demon sect, so if they want to take it, they can only do it secretly. This kind of thing had happened many times before. The disciples of the demon sect colluded with the disciples of Taihao school to take the 1 Chi-Ganoderma. He had also heard of it, so the more he thought about it, the more likely it was. He couldn't help but think, this person's origin is not small, why do I have to fight with him? I can make friends with him instead. His mind instantly became active. One had to know that cultivation was not easy, and although Gongsun Mian was also from a Xian Gate family, his family had declined a long time ago, and there were only a few people left. If it wasn't for the fact that he had some relationship with the Yu family, he might not even have been able to get the cloud sand to form the Xian seed. Although he was at the mystic light realm now, it was extremely difficult for him to go any further. Just the external herbs needed to form the core were enough to stop him from reaching the Tao. However, it seemed like this Li Yuanba still needed to rely on him, and if he cooperated, he might be able to get some benefits. Thinking up to here, he suddenly felt that this was not a bad thing, but a good thing instead. After Lu Tianying left, Zhang Yan put the Yu sisters into a human bag and slowly walked in. He had purposely left some of his words out for Gongsun Mian to hear, and he didn't hide the sound of Lu Tianying flying away to scare him. Now that he saw the slight change in Gongsun Mian's expression, he smiled in his heart, knowing that his actions did not go to waste. After he sat down again, he ordered the servant to serve tea. Lu Tianying had completely put away the reserved attitude of a disciple of a big sect, and he took the initiative to express his goodwill. Brotherly, there is a senior brother in the Treasure Association who is on good terms with me, and it's his turn to be on duty the day after tomorrow. Why don't we go the day after tomorrow? This matter will be more stable. Zhang Yan didn't answer him. He just smiled and said, Brother Gongsun, are you interested in the dragon flame fragrant tongue grass in my monastery? Gongsun Mian looked a little embarrassed, and he quickly waved his hand, I don't dare, I don't dare. Zhang Yan, however, waved his hand, and said very heroically, what's there to be afraid of? It's just a spirit herb, if you like it, you can have it. Hearing this, Gongsun Mian's face suddenly showed a stunned expression, and he blurted out, Brother, you're not joking? Seeing that Zhang Yan frowned, as if he was unhappy, he quickly changed his words, it's a slip of the tongue. Brother, you're such a person, why would you lie to me? His expression didn't change, but he was ecstatic inside. Zhang Yan narrowed his eyes. He first used intimidation and coercion to force Gongsun Mian to bow his head, then faintly revealed the hidden strength behind his back, and finally showed his goodwill. After this series of means, Gongsun Mian no longer had the hostile attitude from before, and even he himself didn't notice the change in his mentality. Originally, Zhang Yan didn't think that this matter would go so smoothly. If this person didn't succeed, he would just look for another Taihao school disciple, but now it seemed that this person was flexible, so there was no need for that for the time being. He laughed, and said, Then brother, you can stay in my Baofeng temple for the next 2 days, I'll go with you the day after tomorrow. Gongsun Mian hurriedly agreed. He was very tactful, and didn't mention anything about the Yu siblings. On the contrary, with these two people in the other party's hands, both of them could rest assured just now. Zhang Yan returned to his own room, and summoned Lu Tianying's disciples to give them some instructions, saying that he was going to visit the outside world, and that he would return in 3 to 5 years at the earliest, or 10 years at the latest. He told them that everything was the same, and that there was no need to panic. Lu Tianying originally didn't care much about things, and since Zhang Yan was with him these few days, there were also people who were suspicious, and it wasn't like no one noticed the flash of golden light just now, so they all thought that the temple master had obtained some kind of celestial fate. Now that everything was settled, Zhang Yan closed his eyes and thought for a while, and remembered that Zhang Pan hadn't contacted him for a few days, so he took out a talisman, and wrote a few words on it, and with a flick of his finger, it flew to Zhang Pan's place. Then, he sat on the couch, and started to cultivate the mystic light. Gongsun Mian stayed in Baofeng Temple for 2 days, and on the dawn of the 3rd day, he came to invite Zhang Yan. After the two of them discussed for a while, they each soared into the clouds and flew towards a mountain gate that the Supreme Sky Sect was stationed in. About 4 hours later, the two of them arrived at this place. Taihao School was located in the southeast of Donghua continent, and there were 4 mansions and 3 mountains under it. Although it wasn't as big as Qinsang School, it was still considered one of the top 10 sects of Xianmen. This place was called Purple Bamboo Mountain, and it was one of the 3 mountains. The mountain gate was located in the depths of the valley. In front of the gate, there was a lush bamboo forest. As far as the eye could see, it was a stretch of verdant green. The bamboo swayed in the wind and the rustling of the wind could be heard. Occasionally, birds and eagles would fly past. When they arrived at the mountain gate, a female disciple came with the wind, and with a clear voice, she said, "Which senior apprentice brother is here?" Gongsun Mian stepped forward, and said, "Is it junior apprentice sister Guan Rong?" The female disciple smiled, and said, "So it's senior apprentice brother Gongsun, I heard that you're a guest at the Yu residence, why are you here today?" Gongsun Mian said, "It's nothing else. I have a good friend who intends to go to the treasure auction, so I brought him here to see Uncle Master." The female disciple's beautiful eyes turned around, and she sized up Zhang Yan. Zhang Yan's body gave off a mighty and unyielding aura from his bones, like an unsheathed blade that pierced the sky. It was completely different from the ethereal and otherworldly temperament of the disciples of Xianmen, and it was inevitable that people would take a few more glances at him. The female disciple chuckled, and said, "This senior apprentice brother is indeed extraordinary. Both of you, please follow junior apprentice sister into the temple." Just as Zhang Yan and Gongsun Mian were about to descend to the clouds, a flying carriage suddenly flew past them, causing their robes to flutter violently. Zhang Yan's eyes narrowed. He could tell that this was intentional, and it was clearly a hidden provocation. Sure enough, the flying carriage turned around and stopped in front of them. Someone on the carriage laughed, and said, "I was wondering who it was, so it's junior apprentice brother Gongsun. Since junior apprentice sister Guan Rong said that the fellow Taoist you brought is extraordinary, let me see who he is." These words were extremely rude, and Gongsun Mian's expression couldn't help but sink, and he snorted. Zhang Yan took a look and saw that this person was a young cultivator. He wore a tall crown on his head, and a white fox fur coat wrapped around his neck and shoulders. He was holding a black and white raccoon in his arms, and he looked quite handsome. Behind him were 4 identical beautiful maids, and they were all 15 or 16 years old. They wore ornaments and rings, and their figures were graceful. Between their brows, there was a hint of flirtatiousness. The young cultivator looked over with a smile, and when he saw Zhang Yan, his eyes couldn't help but freeze. As if he felt that Miao Yi's appearance was outstanding, the young cultivator stopped looking down on him, and he raised his chin, and said, "This fellow Taoist, which sect are you from?" #target =_ blank. Chapter 216. Before Zhang Yan could speak, junior martial sister Guan Rong spat and stood between the two with her hands on her hips. She glared fiercely at the young cultivator and pulled on Zhang Yan's sleeve without any hesitation, saying, "Fellow Taoist, there's no need to pay attention to him. Come with us, I'll go and see martial uncle first." The young cultivator was smiling as if he wasn't angry at all, but there was a hint of coldness in the depths of his eyes. Seeing that junior martial sister Guan Rong had intervened, Gongsun Mian heaved a sigh of relief. To be honest, he really didn't want to have a conflict with this person here. After hesitating for a moment, he whispered in Zhang Yan's ear, "This person is called Yu Hongzhang, a branch disciple of the Yu clan. His father is one of the elders and deacons of this treasure auction. His cultivation isn't very high, but he has recruited many wandering cultivators to work for him. He has a wide circle of friends. When I was staying at the Yu clan before, I accidentally offended him, so he always comes looking for trouble with me. Today, he saw us together, so if Brother Li meets him in the future, you must be careful." He also knew that he couldn't influence Zhang Yan's actions, so he could only tell him the truth about this person's background. Zhang Yan nodded slightly. This kind of thing was more or less common in every clan and sect. He was already used to it, so he didn't take it to heart. Seeing the two whispering, junior martial sister Guan Rong turned around with dissatisfaction and said, "What are you two whispering about behind us?" Gongsun Mian smiled bitterly and said, "It's that Yu Hongzhang." Junior Marshal Sister Guan Rong snorted and said, "Don't worry, if he dares to enter the Jade Leaf Monastery, I'll cut off his dog head with my sword." At this time, the three of them had arrived at the back of the monastery under her guidance. With a wave of her hand, she removed the restrictions here. Among the clouds, a spiritual peak floated in the air, and a waterfall rumbled down, splashing countless jade beads. Celestial cranes and colorful butterflies could be seen flying everywhere, and the immortal chi filled the empty valley. Junior Marshal Sister Guan Rong took the lead and led the two to a mountain rock. Zhang Yan landed on the ground and saw a stone tablet beside his feet. On it were 3 big words, Bao Yan Peak. Junior Sister Guan Rong didn't stop walking, and the two of them followed her. After going around a few jagged rocks, a row of wide stone steps appeared in front of them. At a glance, one could vaguely see 10 large halls in the clouds, arranged in a zigzag manner according to the mountain. The highest hall was floating in the air, accompanied by a rainbow cloud bridge on both sides. Junior Marshal Sister Guan Rong was about to ascend when she heard a whistling sound coming from the peak. A silver light was flying towards her. She revealed a surprised expression and reached out to receive it. It turned out to be a flying letter. She opened it and read a few times, then shook her head and turned around to look at Zhang Yan. She said, "I don't know if the two of you are lucky or unlucky. My martial uncle Lu wants to see this senior martial brother." Gongsun Mian's heart skipped a beat. He suddenly felt that something was wrong. Junior Marshal Sister Guan Rong said to Gongsun Mian, "Since it's Martial Uncle Lu's arrangement, Senior Martial Brother Gongsun can wait in the side hall. I'll bring this Taoist brother to see Martial Uncle." She glanced at Zhang Yan and said, "Fellow Taoist, please follow me. Up ahead is the falling geese stream. If an illusion appears, you must guard your mind. You can only move forward and must not turn back. Otherwise, if you fall into the bottomless abyss, I won't be able to save you." After she finished speaking, she swung her slender waist and flew into the clouds. Gongsun Mian hurriedly came over and whispered, "Fellow Taoist Li, this martial Uncle Lu of mine has a strange temper. When he's in a good mood, he'll casually send us away, but when he's in a bad mood, he'll play around with our disciples. Fellow Taoist Li, you must be careful." After saying that, he shot a few glances at them. Needless to say, Zhang Yan immediately understood from his glances that he wanted him to be careful. This so-called martial Uncle Lu was definitely not as simple as he made it out to be. However, Gongsun Mian was afraid that if he said it out loud, it would be overheard by the other party, so he could only hint at himself. Zhang Yan nodded slightly, indicating that he understood. He took a step forward, and a vast cloud appeared under his feet, lifting him up into the air. He chased after Junior Marshal Sister Guan Rong's figure. Gongsun Mian circled a few times on the spot. Suddenly, he slapped his forehead and exclaimed, "Oh no, the falling geese stream? Isn't this the place where old demon Deng was imprisoned? Could it be that martial Uncle Lu has discovered fellow Taoist Li's identity?" Gongsun Mian's body trembled. Although Zhang Yan did not tell him his identity, he had long believed that Zhang Yan was a cultivator from the Devil's Doctrine. He felt that if the sect came up with a crime of colluding with a cultivator from the Devil's Doctrine and put it on him, he would not be able to bear the responsibility and would be expelled from the sect. For a moment, countless thoughts flashed through his mind. However, after weighing the pros and cons, he decided to wait and see. He thought to himself, "Fellow Taoist Li, this martial Uncle Lu's mana is not as strong as it used to be. You must not reveal any flaws." Zhang Yan followed Junior Marshal Sister Guan Rong and landed on an isolated cliff. There were weeds and withered vines everywhere. It happened to be the side where the light could not reach, so it was cold and damp. Junior Marshal Sister Guan Rong did not seem to want to stay here for long. She wrinkled her nose and pointed to a cave in front of them, saying, "Fellow Taoist, I won't send you off. Martial Uncle Lu has a strange temper, I don't want to see him. You can go in by yourself." She took out another talisman and handed it to Zhang Yan, saying, "If you have the chance to come out later, send this talisman and I will come to pick you up." Zhang Yan nodded and cupped his hands to bid farewell to her. Then, he tidied up his robe and strode into the cave. As soon as he entered, he saw a child walking towards him and said coldly, "Follow me." The cave was 10 feet high and very spacious. The floor was paved with green jade, and the stone walls were brightened with pearls. Zhang Yan followed the child into the inner hall and saw a short Taoist with 2 buns on his head sitting cross-legged on a couch. His eyes were half closed and half open. He was less than 3 feet tall and his white beard touched the ground. In front of him was a withered bamboo cane with a purple-red gourd hanging on it. On the side wall, there was a painting of a Taoist in green. When Zhang Yan saw the painting, although his expression did not change, he was slightly shocked. The Taoist in the painting was obviously Qi Yuntian. He thought about it and looked at the appearance of the Taoist again. He immediately guessed the identity of this Taoist. This Taoist was very famous among the 10 sects of Xian men. He was Han Guzhen of the Taihao sect. The reason why Zhang Yan knew about this Taoist was because Qi Yuntian had mentioned it to him. This Taoist had fought with Qi Yuntian during the sword tournament of the 16 sections. However, Qi Yuntian was more skilled that day and broke the yuanying of this Taoist. In one night, this Taoist shrunk from an 8 feet tall man to a short old man who was less than 3 feet tall. Since then, this Taoist had never entered the sect again. Zhang Yan did not expect that he was here to meet this Taoist. Han Guzhen squinted his eyes and looked at him carefully. In a hoarse voice, he said, "No wonder Daoren felt that you, a junior, have a different aura from ordinary cultivators. So it is because you cultivate the Tao of strength. It is not as I thought." Seeing this, he seemed to lose interest. He waved his sleeve and said, "You can leave." Zhang Yan smiled and cupped his hands towards Han Gu before he turned around and walked out. Han Guzhen frowned. After a while, he said to himself, "No, why don't I know of any other Tao of strength that looks like this? How could it be so easy to cultivate the Tao of strength?" It was true that those who walked this Tao were not simple people. However, one also had to look at their background. This was because the Tao of strength consumed more resources than the Tao of Qi. If it was not for the full support of a large clan or sect, it was impossible to have such a Tao of strength. The more he thought about it, the more suspicious he became. However, he could not be thick-skinned and call Zhang Yan back. He subconsciously stretched out his hand, as if he wanted to calculate. But just as he made this action, his body froze. He sighed and put down his hand. That day, if it was not for his vain attempt to calculate the flaw in Qi Yunyao's Tao, causing his mana to be greatly reduced, Qi Yunyao would not have broken his yuanying Tao with a bolt of purple heaven thunder. After thinking for a while, he took out a few bamboo tokens and made a divination. This was just an unintentional act to relieve his boredom. But the divination made him surprised. He stroked his beard and thought for a while. Suddenly, he opened his eyes and said, "Where is Tong Er?" Tong Er hurriedly ran in. Han Guzhen took out a talisman and said, "Take this to the outside of the mountain. If there is a disciple with the surname Yu there, give this talisman to him and tell him to do this." He whispered a few words, then waved his sleeve and said, "Go." Tong Er was swept up by a gust of wind and walked out of the cave in a daze. When he woke up, he found himself outside the mountain. He looked up and saw a flying carriage suspended in the air. He shouted, "Is your surname Yu?" Yu Hongzhang was playing with a few maids on the flying carriage. When he heard the voice, he felt strange. He looked down and smiled. "Where did this Tong come from? You look handsome." "That's right, my surname is Yu. What business do you have with me?" Tong Er's face was stiff. He threw an item in his hand and said, "Catch." Yu Hongzhang did not think much of it at first. But after he caught the item, his expression changed. He quickly lowered the flying carriage and got off. He went forward and cupped his hands. He said in a low voice, "Junior Marshal brother, please don't blame me. I don't know your identity. What do you have to say to me?" Tong Er said arrogantly, "I want you to say that if someone comes out later." He paused and described Zhang Yan's appearance. "I want you to think of a way to test him. It's best if you fight him. If you can find out more about him, I will definitely reward you." Yu Hongzhang thought for a moment and answered without hesitation, "Junior Marshal brother, please go back and report to me. Just say that I will not let you down." His words were loud and resolute. Tong Er was very satisfied. He said, "Then do your best." He turned around and went back to the mountain gate. Yu Hongzhang looked at the back of the Tong Er, but there was a hint of mockery in his eyes. The maid behind him walked up and hugged his arm. She said, "Young master, isn't the person this Tong Er is talking about the person who was with Gongsun Mian just now?" Yu Hongzhang nodded and said, "That's right. It's him." The maid giggled and said, "Then how does young master plan to deal with him?" Yu Hongzhang sneered and said, "Did I say I was going to deal with him?" The maid was shocked. She said, "Young master, that's an order from me." Yu Hongzhang sneered, "Bullshit. That Han Guzi's foundation was destroyed by Qi Yunyao. Later on, his disciples were all killed by the Shaoqing sect. He didn't even dare to make a sound. You want to use me, Yu Hongzhen, as a tool? Don't even think about it." Chapter 217. The maid thought it was strange and said with a puzzled tone, "Since that spiritual master is useless, why did young master agree to this matter?" Yu Hongzhang chuckled, picked up the maid's soft jade wrist and pinched it. He said with a frivolous smile, "Beauty, you don't understand. No matter what, this Taoist master Han Gu is still an elder in my sect, how can I not be respectful in front of him? No matter what, you have to agree first. Otherwise, it won't be good to be accused of disrespecting your elders. Starting first." Speaking to this point, he changed the topic and said, "Actually, I originally wanted to find trouble with Gongsun Mian and that person. But let me ask you, someone that even Han Gu can't see through, how can he be an ordinary cultivator? It can be seen that this person has a very strong background. I live in this world to be free and unfettered. Why do I have to provoke enemies that I can't afford to provoke?" The maid rolled her eyes at him, but she was full of charm. Yu Hongzhang smiled and lifted her chin. He said, "Moreover, I love to make friends with the heroes of the world. This person is walking with Gongsun Mian, so it's not good for me to go forward. But with this excuse, wouldn't I be able to get to know this person? Hee, speaking of which, this Han Gu has made a wedding dress for me." The maid seemed to have thought of something and said worriedly, "It's just that although spiritual master Han Gu's foundation has been damaged, he still has some ability. If he finds out that young master lied to him and comes to find trouble with you, what should we do?" Yu Hongzhang laughed and said, "In terms of cultivation, I'm not as good as the elders in the clan, but in terms of who knows more and who knows more about the strange things in the world, they can't compare to me. And I happen to know that the reason why Gu Hanzi didn't die back then was all because there was a rare pill jade in the cave that could protect his true energy. If he were to stay away from this thing for a while, he would definitely die. In the future, as long as we don't come here, let's see what he can do to us. Don't tell me he doesn't have the face to sue me." After Zhang Yan left the cave, he carefully recalled the scene just now and confirmed that he did not leave any flaws. Gu Hanzi's current appearance was created from the Thousand Illusions Illustrated Handbook, and after Tao Zhenren had refined it, even ordinary Reverend Mammoth Xiang might not be able to see through it, let alone Gu Hanzi. Moreover, his mind contract mysterious skill was inherited from the ancient Devil Path cultivation method, which was completely different from the current Devil Path cultivation method. The two were poles apart, so it was even more impossible for him to see any problems. After carefully thinking about this matter a few times, he felt relieved and took out the talisman given to him by Junior Marshal Sister Guan Rong. With a flash of green light in his hand, the talisman let out a crane cry and flew into the distant forest. After a while, junior sister Guan Rong arrived on a cloud. When she saw Zhang Yan, she was a little surprised. She smiled and said, "Fellow cultivator, you are really lucky. In the past, most people who were called by Martial Uncle Lu never came out. By the way, how should I address you?" Zhang Yan cupped his hands and said, "I am Li Yuanba." Junior martial sister Guan Rong smiled and said, "So it is fellow Taoist Li. You can call me Guan Rong from now on. Come with me to see martial uncle." Zhang Yan's eyes flickered and he thought to himself, so she didn't ask for my name not because she thought highly of herself, but because she thought I would never come out after entering Gu Hanzi's cave, so there was no need for her to ask any more questions. From this, as long as I can pass through Reverend Han Gu's hands, I won't have to worry about my life. But now, it seemed that the method of identifying and recommending cultivators was different from what he knew. Because of this, Gong Sun Mian didn't say anything. It was unknown whether he didn't say anything on purpose or he didn't know either. In fact, this was Gong Sun Mian's first time recommending a cultivator to participate in the treasure auction. He wasn't even a true disciple, so he wasn't very familiar with the inside story. However, if Zhang Yan had a cultivator with a wide network to recommend him, he probably wouldn't have been able to enter the sect so easily. The two flew for about a quarter of an hour and almost reached the top of the cliff at the top of the Spirit Peak. They landed on a bare rock. Junior martial sister Guan Rong looked back at him and couldn't help but ask, "Since fellow Taoist Li has arrived, have you noticed anything strange?" Zhang Yan raised his eyebrows and thought for a moment before shaking his head. Junior martial sister Guan Rong was shocked and said, "Did you not see or hear anything just now?" Zhang Yan was slightly surprised and said, "See what?" At this moment, a voice came from the top of the cliff. "This little fellow's Tao heart is firm and nothing can disturb it. A mere illusion won't hinder his heart. Guan Rong, you naturally can't compare to him. Quickly invite this fellow up." Junior martial sister Guan Rong muttered and looked a little dissatisfied. She pouted and said to Zhang Yan, "Martial uncle is asking you to come up." Zhang Yan looked up and leaped. A gust of wind blew over and carried his body. After spinning a few rounds, he landed in front of a pavilion with the words, "Pavilion of Autumn Awareness," written on it. In the pavilion, there was a kind-looking Taoist nun sitting on a stone bench. She smiled and nodded at Zhang Yan. She said gently, "Although this fellow Taoist has a dignified appearance, his aura is too vicious. I dare to ask, which sect are you from?" Zhang Yan couldn't see through the Taoist nun's cultivation. To be able to cultivate at the top of this spirit peak, her status was definitely not lower than Han Hanzi's. Perhaps she was also a Taoist master. He thought for a moment and said, "I can't tell you about this. I also don't want to lie to you, so I can't tell you." The Taoist nun didn't get angry. She pointed at the hot tea in front of Zhang Yan on the stone table and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist, please sit down and have some tea." Zhang Yan did not stand on ceremony. He lifted the hem of his robe and sat down on the stone bench. He picked up the teacup and took a sip. He felt the spiritual energy permeating through his body, moistening his lungs and leaving a faint fragrance in his mouth. He unconsciously nodded his head, secretly praising the tea. He looked up and saw that the Taoist nun was sitting there with her eyes closed. She didn't talk to him, so he put down the tea and sat there with her. Zhang Yan sat there for about half an hour, but the other party didn't seem to have any intention of talking. He thought for a while and soon he knew what the Taoist nun was planning. A faint smile appeared on his face as he closed his eyes and restrained his breathing. He also sat there motionlessly. This was the highest peak of the Taihao School's Purple Bamboo Mountain. Not only was the spiritual energy rich, but there was also a faint fragrance. So he used the Dharma access and cultivated Xian techniques. But if he cultivated the Tai light, the other party might be able to see through him. So he was using the Dharma access of the carefree scripture. He originally suspected that this scripture was from the Taihao School. Now that he was using it, he felt the wood's spiritual energy around him gather around his body and enter through his acupuncture points. He felt extremely comfortable. At this time, the tea that he drank earlier was stimulated by the spiritual energy and turned into a ball of clear air that spread to his limbs and bones. He used the Xian technique and unknowingly became immersed in it. If it was someone else here, they wouldn't be able to cultivate so boldly. But he had the northern underworld Sky Metropolis sword to protect him, so he didn't have to worry. After an unknown amount of time, he followed the Dharma access of the carefree scripture and actually cultivated a faint clear and smooth Xian light in his chest. He slowly opened his eyes and saw that the Taoist nun was still sitting in front of him. But the way she looked at him was a little surprised and puzzled. Zhang Yan counted with his fingers and was shocked. 7 days and 7 nights had passed since he entered meditation. The Taoist nun smiled warmly and said, "Congratulations on your improvement." She sighed again and said, "You are magnanimous, but I am cunning and have the heart of a villain." Zhang Yan knew what she meant. Once a cultivator sat down here and felt the abundance of spiritual energy, they couldn't help but adjust their breathing and qi, not wanting to miss this rare opportunity. But if it was a cultivator from the demon sect, then it was different. When they cultivated, most of them used the demons in the demon's cave. Even a few of them could absorb spiritual energy and let others see through them. As for the rogue cultivators, most of their cultivation methods were not as good as the top 10 sects of Xian men. With just a little bit of their cultivation method, they could see through the acupoints that absorbed spiritual energy and know which sect they were from. Therefore, even though he had been sitting here for the past few days, the Taoist nun's spiritual vigor always shrouded his head. If he really was a cultivator from the demon sect, it was impossible to hide from her. Even if she told him in advance, he wouldn't be able to deal with it. Compared to Han Guzi, the Taoist nun's method was more gentle. It was an upright method that made it impossible to hide. If one came here with a fake name, one would eventually be exposed. This was the method used by the Xian men masters. In reality, in the past, when the demon sect disciples came to this Taoist nun's place, they wouldn't be able to sit for long before admitting their identity. The Taoist nun didn't make things difficult for them and instead sent them out politely. The Taoist nun looked over with clear eyes and said, "Friend, your body is strong and your breath is as vigorous as a river. You must be on the path of strength?" Zhang Yan said honestly, "Yes." The Taoist nun said again, "But if I'm not wrong, the method that friend is practicing seems to have some connection with my Taihao school. Otherwise, when absorbing spiritual energy, it wouldn't be so compatible." Zhang Yan praised and said, "Taoist nun has good eyes. When my teacher taught me this method, he didn't tell me personally. Instead, he gave me a seed and told me to plant a tree. Later on, many words appeared on the tree fruit, which is the method that I'm practicing now." The Taoist nun nodded slightly and said, "If that's the case, the method that friend is practicing might have been passed down by the seniors in my sect. Even if it isn't, it has some connection." The reason why Zhang Yan dared to say this was because he wanted to get closer to Taihao school. Moreover, in the Taihao school, every person's method was obtained from the divine tree that they personally planted. It was the method that was most suitable for them. It was useless for others to learn it. The Taoist nun chatted with Zhang Yan for a while longer before she stopped asking questions. She smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Li, I've already recorded your name in the Treasure Assembly's genealogy book. Give me the copper bamboo talisman." Zhang Yan reached into his sleeve and took out the copper bamboo token and handed it to the other party. After the Taoist nun took it, she waved her sleeve and handed it back to him. Zhang Yan took it and looked at it. He saw the 3 words, Li Yuanba, carved on the token. Below it was the year, month, and day. At the bottom corner was the 3 words, Qing Yaozi. It must be this Taoist nun's Taoist name. Holding the token in his hand, he was secretly happy. These days, he spent a lot of effort, and he finally had the qualifications to enter the treasure meeting. Target equals _blank. Chapter 218. After Zhang Yan took the token, junior sister Guan Rong would send him off the spirit peak. When they reached the mountain gate, they saw a streak of light flying out from a temple, and in the blink of an eye, it arrived in front of the two. It was Gongsun Mian who saw Zhang Yan leaving the spirit peak, and thus hurried over. Seeing that Zhang Yan was fine, he heaved a sigh of relief in his heart, and went forward to greet him. "Brotherly, you've finally come out." After Zhang Yan entered the mountain, there was no news of him for 7 to 8 days. Gongsun Mian did not know the inside story, and even when he asked junior sister Guan Rong, she did not know anything. These few days, he was very uneasy. If Zhang Yan's background was really found to be problematic, not only would he not be able to escape, if anything happened to the Yu siblings, would the Yu clan let him off? Fortunately, Zhang Yan had come out safe and sound, and he did not have to live in fear anymore. Zhang Yan cupped his hands and smiled. "A few days ago, I had a congenial conversation with the seniors in the temple, so I stayed for a few more days. I've made brother Gongsun wait for a long time." Gongsun Mian waved his hands, and said, "It's alright, it's alright. It's good that brother is fine." "Oh right." He took out a letter from his sleeve, and handed it to Zhang Yan. With a strange expression, he said, "This is the invitation that Yu Heng Zhang wrote for brother, saying that he is inviting brother to attend a meeting at the Nine Dragons Lake, but he sent it to me. I don't know what he's up to, so I don't dare to act on my own, so I can only hand it over to brotherly to handle." After Yu Heng Zhang made up his mind to befriend Zhang Yan, he initially waited patiently for a day or two, but after that, he lost interest, and ordered his maidservant to deliver a letter. Ignoring Han Guzi's instructions, he swaggered away. After receiving the letter, Zhang Yan did not even look at it. He threw it into his sleeve and left the mountain gate with Gongsun Mian. The two of them landed in front of the bamboo forest. Zhang Yan took out the pouch and poured it down. The unconscious Yu siblings rolled out and said, "Since the talisman is in my hands, I won't make things difficult for fellow Taoist Gongsuan's two juniors. Everything that happened before will be written off." Gongsun Mian smiled bitterly and helped the two siblings up. Although the two siblings were cultivators, their cultivation was low and they were unconscious in the sack. They didn't know how to regulate their breath and qi. They didn't eat or drink for 7 to 8 days, so they probably didn't feel good. At this moment, Zhang Yan's gaze flashed, and he seemed to have sensed something and said, "Taoist brother Gongsun, I have some matters to attend to, so I'll be leaving first. I'll be staying at Baofeng Monastery before the treasure meet, and that blazing dragon tongue grass will probably need another 100 days to mature. At that time, Taoist brother can come and collect it." Gongsun Mian hurriedly said, "All right, senior brother, if you have something to attend to, you can go. I'll come to visit Taoist brother another day." The two of them bowed to each other and Gongsun Mian held the Yu sisters under his arms. He stepped on a ball of mysterious light and flew southwest. After he left, Zhang Yan waved his hand and a talisman flew toward him. He raised his wrist and caught it in his hand. These few days, he was in the Purple Bamboo Mountains dojo. There was a restriction outside the monastery, so the talisman couldn't enter. However, his talisman was used by the Clear Feather sect, so it was different from a normal talisman. If it couldn't find a messenger, it would take the initiative to attach itself to the birds and beasts nearby until its spiritual qi was exhausted. Zhang Yan opened the talisman and saw that it was a letter from Zhang Pan. A night had passed since the letter was sent. After reading the letter, he frowned and a trace of coldness flashed across his eyes. He stood up and turned into a rainbow as he flew toward Baofeng Monastery. The Qin couple had been protected by Zhang Pan for more than a month, so their days were peaceful. However, in the middle of the night last night, they suddenly heard a commotion in the hall. It sounded like someone was fighting and shouting. However, the noise quickly dissipated. When they helped each other out, they saw Zhang Pan standing in the middle of the hall with a corpse at his feet. The corpse's face could not be identified. Chen Jisher was so scared that his face turned pale. He retreated and almost fell to the ground. Chen Fujin was bold. He pushed away the maid beside him and walked to Zhang Pan. He bowed and said, "Little Taoist, what happened?" Zhang Pan said in a low, muffled voice, "This man and a Taoist came here in the middle of the night and sneaked into your room. They must be up to no good. I went up to ask them but they wanted to attack me. I killed them with one punch." Chen Fujin asked, "What about that Taoist?" Zhang Pan said in a muffled voice, "That Taoist's feet seemed to be smeared with oil. He was very slippery. He has already escaped." Chen Fujin asked again, "Did he say anything before he left?" Zhang Pan thought for a moment and said, "No." Chen Jishe could be said to have gained a lot of experience over the past few days. After the initial panic, he slowly regained his composure. He stepped forward to hold Chen Fujin's hand and comforted her. "Wife, it might be a thief who came to steal our property." Chen Fujin shook his head and said, "If this servant's guess is correct, this must be Ma Daojin's accomplice, and they are here to avenge him." In fact, she vaguely knew in her heart that the other party was here for the soul-gathering bell, but if this matter were to be mentioned, her cowardly husband would definitely force her to give it away. She also planned to leave it for her unborn child, so she did not mention this matter at all. She frowned and thought for a moment. She turned to Zhang Pan and said, "Little Taoist, do you have the ability to send a message to Taoist Zhang?" Zhang Pan said loudly, "Master has already told me that if there is any abnormality, regardless of whether it is big or small, I must inform him immediately. I have already sent a letter to Master." Hearing this, Madame Chen breathed a sigh of relief. She held her abdomen and took 2 steps forward. Suddenly, she said, "That Taoist must have come this time because he doesn't know what you're capable of. That's why he wasn't prepared. If he brings his accomplices here again, I'm afraid it won't be so simple. It looks like we can't stay here anymore." Chen Jishe opened her mouth and asked blankly, "Then where to?" Chen Fujin said decisively, "To Baofeng Monastery. We will leave now." Zhang Pan did not mind and said, "Both of you leave first. I will take care of the corpse here." His method was nothing more than to swallow the corpse. However, he did not want the Chen couple to see it in case they were scared out of their wits. "All right." Chen Fujin made a prompt decision. Although she did not know if the other party would return, the longer they stayed here, the more dangerous it would be. For the sake of the child in her belly, she could not take the risk. She immediately dragged Chen Jishe back to the room to tidy up. After she had tidied up a few changes of clothes and a few pieces of jewelry, she looked back and saw that Chen Jishe was still carefully stroking the things in the box. She could not help but be angry. She reached out and threw the things aside. She complained, "Husband, you don't have to bring these stupid things. You can take them when you come back." Chen Jishe hurriedly picked up the things and scolded, "Wife, what you said is wrong. How can these things be useless and stupid? You must know that these are the words of a sage. How can you give them up so easily?" Chen Fujin was secretly annoyed and said, "The more you read, the more you will understand. Why is he becoming more and more pedantic? When my child is born, I must send him to Taoist Zhang to learn the Tao. I cannot be like him." She also knew that she could not persuade him. She quickly called for her maidservant, Qiao, and ordered her to go to the entrance of the village to borrow a mule cart to transport goods for the Taoist temple. She also told her that they were fleeing and that the price was more than 10,000, so she could not be calculative. The 3 of them dawdled for about 2 hours before they finished tidying up. They left the village and went to Baofeng Temple. However, after traveling for a few miles, the heavens were not in their favor. It began to drizzle, and not long after, the road became muddy. Because of this, their progress became slower. At the same time, the Taoist who was beaten away by Zhang Pan ran all the way to an earth temple. Only then did he stop, gasping for breath. He patted his numb legs and quickly took out a few broken sticks of incense. He picked out a few long sticks and placed them on the altar. He then lit them and took out a talisman paper to burn. Then, he took 2 steps back and said respectfully, "Your disciple invites Grand Uncle Master to come." A short while later, a ray of light flashed and landed in front of him. It was a middle-aged Taoist. He was short and wore a sun scarf on his head. His face was mostly covered by a round brim. Only his long beard fluttered in front of his chest. He wore a green Taoist robe, white socks, and a pair of shoes. He held an inconspicuous tarpaulin umbrella in his hand. The Taoist hurriedly bowed and said in shame, "Grand Uncle Master, I have failed you." The middle-aged Taoist said carelessly, "Min Chong, you said you would bring me good news in the next few days. But now I have rejoiced for nothing." Min Chong hurriedly knelt down and said with a sad face, "Grand Uncle Master, it is not that I did not try my best." The Qin couple had a powerful Taoist child protecting them. Even young Master Feng's steward Ji was killed by him. When Min Chong and steward Ji heard of Ma Daojin's death, although they knew the Qin couple were on the other side of the river, they did not dare to make a move because they had some relationship with Baofeng Temple. But they did not leave and kept looking for an opportunity. Just a few days ago, their spies in Baofeng Temple heard that monastery head Lu had gone on a journey. They were overjoyed. They were only afraid of Lu Yaoying. Since he was not here, what else was there to worry about? That was why the two of them went to find the Qin couple last night, wanting to force them to reveal the whereabouts of the soul-gathering bell. They had originally thought that they had a 90% chance of success, but they never expected that even though the Qin couple were mortals, Zhang Pan was a demon in human form. Steward Ji was beaten to death on the spot. If not for Min Chong's 1,000 miles godly strider talisman and his quick feet, he might not have been able to return. The middle-aged Taoist suddenly asked, "You said that Lu Yaoying went on a journey? Is this true?" Min Chong hurriedly said, "There is no mistake. I heard that Daoren has been gone for 7 or 8 days. The middle-aged Taoist nodded. Although the soul-gathering bell in the Qin couple's hands was not a powerful artifact, it was a part of a certain artifact in his sect. He had to get it back. Originally, he ordered Ma Daojin to retrieve it, but he was killed. He was worried that Daoren was protecting the couple. He also knew that the Taoist was a mystic light realm cultivator like him, so he did not make a move. Now that Lu Daoren was gone, he had no more worries. What could a Taoist child do? So he said, "Fine, since I'm already here today, I'll go with you and retrieve the spirit-gathering bell." Min Chong flattered, "If Martial Granduncle is here, it will be a piece of cake." The middle-aged Taoist did not comment. He picked Min Chong up and a ray of light appeared under his feet. He walked towards the Qin couple's previous residence. To be continued. Target =_blank. Chapter 219. Shi Yangzi. The middle-aged Taoist and Min Chong traveled leisurely on the conveyance light towards the river bank. In a short while, they had crossed the river and arrived at the village where the Qin couple lived. He looked around and saw that there were hundreds of farmers. Chickens and dogs could be heard everywhere. Only the east side of the village had a huge house with white walls and tiles. Min Chong pointed at the house and said, "This is where the Qin couple lived." The middle-aged Taoist was not in a hurry. He stood in the air and looked at the house for a while. Then, he brought Min Chong down from the cloud. However, when they landed in the yard, they realized that the place was empty. Min Chong listened carefully. He entered the house and circled around. Then, he hurriedly ran out and said, "Grand Uncle Master, they left not long ago. If we go after them now, we will definitely be able to catch up." The middle-aged Taoist did not say a word. He stared at the puddle of black blood under his feet. Min Chong was stunned. He took a few glances and sighed, "Steward Ji was beaten to death by that ugly kid here." The middle-aged Taoist stretched out his hand and took a whiff of the turbid yellow qi of the earth. He sniffed it and said in a low voice, "There's demonic aura." Min Chong was stunned. Demonic aura? The middle-aged Taoist scoffed, "The Qin couple are mortals. If no one else came here just now, the demonic aura might have come from the kid." Min Chong was confused. Could it be some kind of demon? The middle-aged Taoist lifted his son's scarf a little and revealed a pair of sharp eyes. He said, based on the demonic aura, it is just a small demon that has not transformed for a long time. But I believe it was sent by Daoran to protect the couple before he left. But I don't care about it. Min Chong, I will go after them. You stay here and search this house carefully. Don't let go of the underground too. See if the Bell of Soul convening is hidden here. Remember, do not miss anything. Min Chong hurriedly agreed and said, Grand Marshal Uncle, I will definitely search carefully. The middle-aged Taoist nodded, waved his sleeves, and left in a flash of green light. At this time, the Qin couple were just now halfway to the Baofeng Monastery. They were still a dozen or so li away from the Baofeng Monastery, but the rain was getting heavier and the road ahead was getting more and more muddy. The mule cart was also having a hard time moving forward. At this time, Zhang Pan seemed to be a little uneasy. He was originally a spirit of the sea, and in this humid weather, he was especially sensitive to approaching danger. He glanced at the sky, took out a talisman, and muttered an incantation. Following the method taught by Zhang Yan, he threw the talisman into the sky. The talisman made a circle in the air, and then fell in the northwest direction. It actually spontaneously combusted in this heavy rain, and turned into a pile of ashes. His expression couldn't help but change. Not good, this is an ominous sign. Someone powerful is chasing us. When the Qin couple heard this, they were both frightened. Without hesitation, Zhang Pan took out 2 talisman with golden patterns from his sleeve, and walked in front of the couple in 2 steps, saying, This is the Flying Cloud Talisman, passed down by Master. It can help the 2 of you to travel 100 miles away. When the talisman is activated, you must not open your eyes, or else you will fall from the clouds and die a horrible death. These words made Chen Jishi's face pale, and he was about to refuse, but the situation was critical, so Zhang Pan didn't want to waste time talking to them. He picked up the talisman and slapped it on the couple's body. There was a flash of golden light, and 2 figures flew up to the clouds, disappearing in a flash. However, when the 2 of them left, the maidservant Xiao was left behind. Terrified, she pulled on Zhang Pan's sleeve, and said with a sobbing tone, Little Taoist, what about this maidservant? Previously, Zhang Yan only gave Zhang Pan 2 talismans, and he didn't have any more. Zhang Pan looked at Xiao's delicate and pitiful appearance. Although her pretty face was stained with tears, it couldn't hide her beauty. For some reason, his heart palpitated, and he took out a pill and gave it to her, saying, This pill can warm your body and get rid of the cold. You can go hide in the forest for the time being. The person chasing after you is your master, why would he care about you? When the rain stops, you can go to Baofeng Monastery to look for them. When Xiao heard this, she felt that it made sense, so she took the pill and ate it. She thanked Zhang Pan, picked up the hem of her dress, and hurriedly ran towards the forest not far away. Zhang Pan stood on the spot and looked up at the sky. Although this flying cloud talisman could carry a person and escape, its speed wasn't fast. If the person's cultivation was high, once he gave chase, there was a high chance that he could catch up. Therefore, with just these 2 talismans, they wouldn't be able to save him, so he had to go and stop him. As for whether he could stop this person, he had some confidence. After the battle at the East Sea, Zhang Yan's cultivation had improved again, and he could come and go as he pleased just by controlling the sword pellet. Many of the talismans in the past were no longer of much use to him, and since he didn't have any disciples by his side, he gave some to Zhang Yan to protect himself. Other than that, there were also a few talismans given to Zhang Yan by a few disciples of the demon kings to curry favor with him. His wealth was so rich that it was astounding. After waiting for a few breaths, he saw a ray of clear light flying over from the sky. He reached into his sleeve and took out a jade token. This jade tablet was called the Immortal Bird Jade Talisman, and it was a gift that Yan Xia of the Blue Feather Pavilion gave to Zhang Yan as an apology to her little brother. This jade talisman had a crane spirit soul, and if it was used properly, its power wouldn't be weaker than a cultivator at the third level of the mystic light realm. Zhang Pan immediately slapped the talisman, and he heard a crane cry. A white light flashed in front of his eyes, and a white crane flapped its wings and flew towards the person. The middle-aged Taoist had already seen the figures of the Chen couple from afar, and when he saw that they used the talisman to escape, he became anxious. Just as he was about to chase after them, he suddenly saw a white ray shooting into the sky and heading towards him. He was also shocked, and he quickly turned around. He shook his sleeve, and a green profound light flew out, blocking the white ray. He took a closer look, and just now, he could see that it was an illusory spirit soul of a spirit crane. The surging spirit energy on this spirit made him frown, and he didn't dare to underestimate it anymore. He focused his mind to deal with it. However, after fighting for a few rounds, he slowly realized that the crane spirit's movements were slow and stiff, and it didn't match the abundant spirit energy on its body. He couldn't help but think that it was just so. Although this crane spirit's strength wasn't weaker than a cultivator at the third level of the mystic light realm, it still needed the person holding the talisman to control it. However, this Zhang Pan was just a little monster that hadn't transformed for a long time, and he usually relied on his monster cultivation to bully others. His own cultivation level wasn't that high, so he was extremely clumsy when fighting. The middle-aged Taoist waved his sleeve, and pushed the spirit crane to the side. He said in the air, "Little Taoist boy, I, Shi Yangzi, came today because of the lost treasure of our sect. You and I are both cultivators, why do we have to go against each other for two mortals? If you take a step back today, I won't make things difficult for you, and I'll let you go." How could Zhang Pan believe him? Although he didn't know about the soul-gathering bell, from what he could see, this person was obviously on the same side as Taoist Ma. He killed Taoist Ma, so there was no reason for him to let it go. Therefore, he didn't say anything, and only focused on activating the talisman. Shi Yangzi shouted a few times, but Zhang Pan still didn't respond. He was annoyed, and said, "Do you really think I'm afraid of you?" He snorted, and waved his sleeve to force the spirit crane back. He then leaped to the side, and pointed his finger downwards, and a green profound light flew towards Zhang Pan. Zhang Pan was shocked, and quickly rolled on the ground, and awkwardly avoided the profound light. Shi Yangzi sneered, and raised the oil paper umbrella in his hand into the air. With a spell, the umbrella opened up. In an instant, a gust of black wind blew within the umbrella. The spirit crane lost its master's control, and became dumb and didn't know how to dodge. It was swept up by the black wind, and was sucked into the umbrella. When Zhang Pan got up, he saw this scene, and couldn't help but be shocked. In a moment of desperation, he hurriedly shot a dozen black pearls at the umbrella. Shi Yangzi chuckled, and with a point of his hand, the umbrella spat out a grey mist, and sucked all the pearls into it. Zhang Pan didn't give up, and threw a 5-colored coral stone in the air. Shi Yangzi laughed, and said, "Today, however many instruments you send, I'll take." He activated his magic power, and the treasured umbrella spun in the air. Suddenly, a white gas flashed out, and with a roll, the stone disappeared without a trace. In fact, although his words were beautiful, he was actually very surprised. One had to know that he was willing to put down his pride to deal with two mortals for a magic treasure, but this little boy had an endless supply of magic treasures and instruments, and no one knew if he had any powerful tricks up his sleeves. If he hadn't brought the 3-chi treasure covering umbrella with him today, he probably wouldn't have been able to do anything to the other party. Even the boy beside him could be this extravagant, one could imagine how difficult it was to deal with Lu Tianying. He couldn't help but secretly rejoice that he didn't act rashly earlier. At this moment, Zhang Pan was in a dilemma. He reached into his sleeve, and took out a black ink stone, and said to himself, "Treasure, whether or not I can keep my life today depends on you." He shouted, and threw the inkstone into the air. In a split second, the object expanded to 50 feet in size, and smashed down on Shi Yangzi's head. Seeing this object, Shi Yangzi's eyes lit up, and he shouted, "Good treasure." For a moment, greed rose in his heart, and he thought, no matter who you are, I'll kill you here today. After obtaining this treasure, even if I lose the soul-gathering bell, it'll be worth it. Even if Lu Tianying comes back in the future, how would he know who did it? Thinking of this, he shook his shoulder, and a green light appeared on top of his head. In a flash, it grew to 10 feet in size, and like a green leaf, it held the inkstone in place, preventing it from falling. At the same time, killing intent rose in his eyes, and with a wave of his hand, a white light with cold air whizzed towards Zhang Pan. Zhang Pan saw that the white light was coming at him too fast, and he couldn't avoid it in time, so he panicked. But right at this moment, the fate-determining jade tablet that Zhang Yan bestowed to him flew up, and it actually blocked the white light for a moment, yet it was unable to injure him. Shi Yangzi's face twitched, and he snorted. With a point of his finger, the white light flew up again. Seeing that the dagger was about to fall again, Zhang Pan couldn't think of anything else, and stared at his opponent, and shouted, "If you dare to hurt me, my master will not let you go." Shi Yangzi laughed, and said, "Even if your master is here, I'd like to see what he can do to me." Just as his voice fell, a loud shout came from the sky. This shout was like a thunderclap. Before the person arrived, a wave of air rushed over. Shi Yangzi only felt a buzzing sound in his ears. His body swayed and he almost fell from the cloud. Target =_blank. Chapter 220. Death by 3 hammers. Shi Yangzi's body only shook a little before he immediately woke up. Just from this shout, he could tell that this person's cultivation was definitely not below his own, and it might even be higher. Furthermore, it was very likely that this person was the elder of this Taoist child in front of him. If one came, it would be easy to deal with, but if 2 or 3 came, he definitely wouldn't be able to escape. Therefore, the safest choice for him right now was to temporarily hide. However, there was a trace of hesitation in his eyes before a trace of treachery and fierceness appeared in his eyes. His eyes sharpened as he let out a low roar. Not only did he not leave, but he even curled his finger. The white light spun in the air and charged towards Zhang Pan without a care for anything else, revealing an expression that seemed like it wouldn't stop until it killed him. However, at this moment, there was the sound of wind breaking. This whistling sound made one's eardrums vibrate as if they were about to be torn apart. A multicolored flying hammer flew over in time and collided with the white light. With the sound of metal colliding, the white light immediately shattered into 3 pieces and fell to the ground. Upon closer inspection, it was a cold iron dagger. Good. Seeing this, not only was Shi Yangzi not surprised, but a trace of joy appeared in his eyes as if his plan had succeeded. Taking this opportunity, he stretched out his hand and grabbed at the crane spirit jade talisman in Zhang Pan's hand. The latter didn't release it and was caught off guard. He only had time to let out a cry before the jade talisman was sucked away by Shi Yangzi. After Shi Yangzi took the jade talisman, he threw it into his sleeve and then opened the 3 chi covering earth umbrella in the air. With a shake, a wisp of black chi flew out from under the umbrella and collected the soul-suppressing inkstone. Then, with a roll of the profound light, he actually wrapped himself up and turned into light to escape without looking back. These actions were done extremely smoothly, and he finished them before Zhang Yan arrived. He was also very proud of his swift actions. It wasn't that he was afraid of Zhang Yan, but he felt that it wasn't easy for him to cultivate to this point. He still wanted to reach the Tao of immortality one day, so he treasured his life a lot. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he wouldn't easily fight with other cultivators of the mystic light realm. Therefore, after learning that the Qin couple might have been taken care of by Lu Tianying, he would rather endure it and not look for trouble. More importantly, he wasn't clear about Zhang Yan's background. He was truly afraid of Zhang Yan's method of using one transcendent artifact after another. If Zhang Yan were to do the same, how would he be able to defend himself? Even if he could defeat his opponent, who didn't have a fellow master. If they came to find trouble with him one after another, would he still be able to cultivate? Therefore, he would rather leave first than take the initiative to start a conflict with the other party. It would be best if he did not even meet the other party face to face, lest a conflict arise when they meet again in the future. He flew the entire way with the intention of keeping the peace. After traveling for several dozen miles, he turned around and saw a cloud of mist following closely behind him. He couldn't help but curse in his heart. However, when he looked carefully, although the other party's speed wasn't slow, it wasn't much faster than him. His heart made up, he touched the treasured umbrella and took out the treasured inkstone. He placed it in front of his eyes and revealed a pleased expression. He felt that this trip was worth it. At this moment, it didn't matter if the soul-gathering bell could catch up to him or not. He had just seen the power of the inkstone and it was definitely above the complete six-god bell. It was just that it couldn't display its power in Zhang Pan's hands. Once he went back and refined this inkstone, it would be enough for him to try his luck at the Treasure Zoisha conference. Zhang Yan followed closely behind Shi Yangzi. His eyes stared forward with a hint of playfulness. This person had come to make things difficult for the Qin couple twice. Although he didn't know what his goal was, Madame Chen had a person who had a great karmic connection with him in her womb. He couldn't allow anything to happen to the child before it was born. He couldn't stay by the Qin couple's side to protect them at all times. Moreover, this person had taken his soul-suppressing inkstone, so in his eyes, he had become a person that had to be eliminated. However, he was now acting as a strength path cultivator and had never used strength path to fight an enemy alone. Originally, he wanted to find a cultivator to practice with. Now that this person had delivered himself to his door, it was exactly what he wanted. Therefore, he didn't use his sword to escape and continued to move forward on the cloud. If the other party didn't stop, he didn't mind following him. He wanted to see who would be the first to give up. After about an hour, Shi Yangzi looked back again and found that the other party's speed seemed to be a little faster than before. He couldn't help but be slightly surprised. He thought about it carefully and determined that it wasn't that the other party's speed had become faster. Instead, it was that he had unknowingly used up his spiritual qi. As a result, his speed was much slower than before. He thought to himself and said, if this goes on, this person will catch up to me in at most 30 minutes. I need to prepare early. He opened his palm and revealed the crane spirit jade talisman that he had been holding tightly in his hand. He couldn't help but let out a low laugh. After such a long time of flying, he had already refined this talisman using his sect's direct lineage mental cultivation method to make it his own. Although he rarely fought with cultivators, he was very good at the Tao of survival and avoiding disasters. He often watched other people fight and often thought about how he would deal with different situations. Therefore, his brain worked very fast. When Zhang Yan arrived earlier, he immediately thought of Zhang Pan's crane spirit jade talisman. Now that the crane spirit had been kept into the three qis earthen umbrella, if he were to snatch the talisman, he would be able to use it to fight with his opponent later. Not only would he be able to test his opponent's strength, even if he really couldn't win, he would still have time to escape. At this moment, he stopped and kept the conveyance light. He opened the umbrella and released the spirit crane spirit essence. Then, he held the talisman. Under the urging of his mana, the spirit crane spirit essence with white feathers and black tail let out a loud and clear cry. It flapped its wings and flew up. In a blink of an eye, its body doubled in size. It was almost 100 feet in size. In the clouds, a white bird was fluttering. It raised its beak and danced. Its feathers fluttered like a celestial spirit. Its red crown was like blood. Its cry cut through the blue clouds. There was light in its eyes. It no longer had the dull look it had when it was in Zhang Pan's hands. Shi Yangzi shook the talisman in his hand again. The spirit crane spirit essence turned one round and used its long red beak to peck Zhang Yan. Zhang Yan sneered in his heart. He didn't expect this person to use tricks. He used the talisman he gave to Zhang Pan to deal with him. However, he didn't care about a mere spirit crane. Not only did he not dodge, he rushed forward. With a loud shout, he raised the adamantine golden hammer in his hand and smashed it down. A muffled sound that sounded like a drum rang in the air. It was as if the hammer had smashed on the surface of water. White mist and ice beads scattered in all directions, creating layers of ripples on the body of the spirit crane. The transmogrified body of the spirit crane flickered, showing signs of collapsing under the hammer. The spirit crane's spirit essence's beak also pierced into Zhang Yan's shoulder. It penetrated several inches deep and blood seeped out from under his clothes. However, he didn't seem to feel it. He let go of the golden hammer and grabbed the spirit crane's spirit essence's neck with his other hand. He then raised the hand holding the hammer and smashed it down. This strike landed squarely on the head of the spirit crane. With a wail, it flapped its wings and kicked its legs in a disorderly manner, trying to struggle free. However, Zhang Yan's hand seemed to be made of iron and did not budge at all. He once again raised the mixed iron fierce golden hammer in his hand and suddenly let out a loud shout. Only a loud bang was heard and the spirit crane beneath him collapsed. Specks of spiritual light flew away, leaving only traces of clear chi lingering around the golden hammer and lingering in the air. The talisman in Shi Yangzi's hand shattered into powder and fell from his fingers. He was dumbfounded. The spirit crane's spirit essence that was comparable to a cultivator at the third level of the mystic light realm was destroyed just like that? He shuddered and didn't dare to stay for even a second longer. He hurriedly turned into a streak of light and escaped. Zhang Yan circulated his Xian Qi and the wound on his shoulder immediately disappeared. Seeing that Shi Yangzi wanted to escape, a hint of mockery flashed across his face. He formed a hand seal and the golden hammer that he had just thrown away was already waiting in the air in front of him. It smashed down right at Shi Yangzi. Shi Yangzi only moved a few dozen feet before he felt that something was wrong. He raised his head and saw a golden hammer smashing toward him. He was instantly scared out of his wits and quickly twisted his body. He avoided the front, but the side of his back was lightly grazed, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood. Zhang Yan's body turned into a breeze. However, the aura around him was fierce and fierce. The wind around him was like 1,000 horses galloping over. After a few rounds, Shi Yangzi could already tell that he was a cultivator that cultivated the strength path. How would he dare to let him get close? Shi Yangzi gathered all the Xian Qi in his body and revealed the profound light above his head. He then shook his body and the profound light dots rained down on Zhang Yan like hailstones. Zhang Yan waved his hammers and the profound light dots scattered like water splashing across the reef. He arrived in front of Shi Yangzi after a few steps and smashed the hammer down on his face. The profound light in front of him was scattered like a piece of paper. The remaining force didn't stop and it landed on Shi Yangzi's shoulder. Crack! Shi Yangzi's shoulder bone shattered. He let out a miserable cry and his body bent down. Zhang Yan was fighting to his heart's content, the golden hammer in his other hand swept horizontally. Shi Yangzi was scared out of his wits. Hastily he used the 3 Qis covering earth umbrella to block, but it was like a rotten wood supporting a beam, it broke with a loud noise. The hammer fell on Shi Yangzi's abdomen, causing blood to gush out crazily. The mysterious light dissipated, Shi Yangzi could no longer stand and fell backward. Zhang Yan reached out and grabbed his collar, lifting him up and raising the hammer in his hand high again. Seeing that his life was at stake, Shi Yangzi coughed up a few mouthfuls of blood and said hatefully, wait, who are you? Can you tell me? Zhang Yan glanced at him and laughed loudly. Remember this, I am Li Yuanba. He roared and smashed the hammer down. Shi Yangzi's head exploded and he died on the spot. At the same time Shi Yangzi died, thousands of miles away, in a dilapidated Taoist temple hidden deep in the belly of a mountain, a statue that looked like a demon but not a demon, like a god but not a god suddenly opened its eyes. The light in its eyes instantly illuminated the whole temple, and the mud powder on its eyelids fell down. He muttered, Li Yuanba. Interesting, you destroyed one of my doppelgangers. Forget it, it's gone, I'll just replace it. The statue silently muttered a few words and then fell silent again. The brilliance that filled the whole Taoist temple also gradually dimmed. Target equals _blank. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.